Phoenix Nights. Chapter 1265. The Star Gate was opened, and the star point that led to the Storm Island was located. Chun-Rei didn't think much. What he wanted to think, and what he wanted to say had been done. Moreover, he wasn't alone. Athena, Rala, Catherine and others all accepted Ben Hong's Saint Battleheart. They were directly integrated into the star-sealing platform in the state of burning. It was worth mentioning that the corpse necromancer, Garatum, also joined the fusion. Garatum didn't have a strong sense of belonging like others. Although he was quite in awe of the boss who provided him with all the experimental conditions, it wasn't to the extent of handing over his life. However, after learning the truth of the demon realm's dark clouds, the corpse necromancer was very clear that if he joined to enhance Chun-Rei's power, there was still a glimmer of hope. If he gave up, once the power of the dark clouds reached the ultimate state, then even an undead creature like him would be completely annihilated with the world without exception. Survival and continue on the road of research. This was Garatum's obsession at the moment, so he made a choice. Everyone's power was temporarily sealed. As long as Chun-Rei launched the state of battle and released the power of the sky of the star-sealing platform, he could truly integrate the life and the power of the constellation of all the two-star enhancers, burning, to burst out the strongest combat power ever. For the first time, everyone was fighting side by side with him in a real sense. He didn't know if it would be the last time. As soon as Chun-Rei came out of the Star Gate, he felt something was wrong. It was not the original land under his feet, but the ocean. Looking at the dark sky above his head, the original huge island had actually risen from the ground and was suspended in the air. Not only the Storm Island, but also the surrounding environment. He felt that his body was light, and the gravity was greatly weakened. The sky was the same as the demon realm. There were endless dark clouds, and he couldn't see the slightest sunlight. The surrounding light was dim, and it was filled with a cold breath. This, cold, was not a drop in temperature on the surface, but a strange coldness that penetrated deep into the soul. Chun-Rei suddenly felt that the environment was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. What he was sure of was that Quiriana didn't purposely turn the Island of Storms into such a state because she sensed the stars. Instead, the entire surface world had undergone some kind of unusual phenomenon. Chun-Rei did not stay in the stormy sea region. With a sway of his figure, he disappeared from where he was. With Zhang Xian's current strength, even without using the polar star transformation, his strength far surpassed that of an ordinary pinnacle semi-divinity realm cultivator. Without using his full strength, he was able to leave the Tempest Sea region and appear in the territory of the Yanxiao Kingdom. Chun-Rei frowned when he saw the scene in front of him. The former Yanxiao Kingdom had turned into ruins. This was to be expected. However, there were countless huge pits in the ruins, and blood-red magma could be faintly seen. There were several large islands in the sky, just like the Island of Storms they had seen before. The difference was that these islands were made of mud mixed with bones, which looked eerie and weird. Each bone island represented the process of countless lives being brutally destroyed. It was not the first time that Chun-Rei saw this kind of bone island. He had personally destroyed one in the main altar of despair, but it was the first time that he saw one in the air like this. The floating bone island in front of him was even more eerie and cold than the one he saw at the main altar of despair. There were also clouds of looming smoke wandering in the tower forest. Chun-Rei could see that this smoke was not an ordinary mist, but an existence similar to a soul body, which gave people a chilling feeling. The most incredible thing was that analytical eyes didn't have any data of these soul bodies, as if they did not exist in this world. After the soul bodies discovered Chun-Rei, they rushed over one after another. Chun-Rei's heart moved. He didn't evade and let the souls attack him. The souls did not seem to exist in this world as they passed through Chun-Rei. At the moment of passing through, Chun-Rei's soul gave birth to a familiar chill. He finally remembered, these are wandering souls. The wandering souls of the UFO land. This discovery made the familiar feeling in Chun-Rei's heart become clearer and clearer. He finally reacted. It turned out that the entire surface world had been transformed into an existence similar to the UFO land. These wandering souls are a bit weird. Chinray frowned even tighter. He felt that the wandering souls were like phantoms. They were not real existences, so analytical eyes did not show any data. However, the chill was real, but it was much weaker than the wandering souls of the UFO land. Right, this is not a simple transformation, but an overlap. Space overlap, Chinray blurted out. He was no longer a rookie who had just come into contact with this magic world. He suddenly understood and was inexplicably horrified at the same time. Quiriana actually wanted to merge the main plane and the UFO land. No, it is very likely to merge the entire mysterious place into one. What is she trying to do? As Chinray was thinking, the blood-red magma flowing in the huge pit below had quickly become hot. The cold in the air was replaced by heat. Groups of wriggling bodies quickly formed in the magma and kept surging toward Chinray. Chinray did not look at the Lord of the Abyss and the fiery sorceress who were rushing toward him, nor did he look at the sky full of bone spikes. The moment the nearest bone spike approached him, he suddenly froze in the air. Not only the bone spikes, but all the monsters froze and stopped moving. A gust of wind blew, and the frozen bodies immediately scattered into dust. However, the characteristic of the abyssal monsters was that they were endless. The huge pit of blood-red magma began to boil again, and more monsters surged out. Chinray raised his eyebrows and punched down. An even larger fist print appeared near the pit below, carrying a special chill. The blood-red color in the pit quickly dimmed and began to solidify and collapse, then disappeared. This kind of collapse was actually a temporary solution. If it was entangled in this corner of the Yanxiao kingdom, it would only be a waste of power. Chinray did not clear all the huge pits one by one. His figure swayed, and he left the area. Only by getting rid of the source of power was the only way to completely destroy these monsters. If his guess was right, the nightmare plane would be the final source of power, and also the final battlefield. Chinray did not stop, and he teleported with all his might in the direction of the nightmare plane. He crossed many regions along the way, from the eastern continent across the White Sea territory to the western continent. As expected, the entire continent had been transformed into a scene similar to the UFO land, and he could not feel any life aura other than the abyssal power. However, it seemed that this transformation was not complete. There were still many traces of the previous war, the scarred ruined cities, the deformed landforms in front of the fortress, the White Sea that had turned into mulberry fields. These dilapidated scenes were all proof of the fight against the abyss, and it was also a picture scroll with life and survival as the main theme. In the future, distant or nearby, this war might be described as a tragic and magnificent epic that would be eulogized for thousands of generations. Perhaps all the remaining lives in the demon realm would lose their future, and the original wisdom and civilization would come to an end. His current position was already the Ryo Empire, and it would not be long before he could cross the ice sea to reach his final destination. After a few high-speed visual changes, the scene in front of him changed from the floating bone island to a full blood-red. The ice sea should now be called the Blood Sea. The sea was not cold ice water, but boiling magma. The air was filled with suffocating heat, and a sparkling red flower of duo floated on the surface of the sea. The clouds in the sky were no longer gloomy like before, but blood-red, showing a radial shape, as if caused by some great power in the distance. The space here was filled with powerful abyssal power, and his own strength was obviously suppressed. Here, the abyssal creatures could exert their strongest state, and the power of outsiders would be greatly reduced. Chinray did not teleport again, but changed to flying. The Blood Sea felt the intruder and began to boil violently. The flowers of abyss burst into blood mist one after another, and dozens of huge tentacles suddenly stretched out in front of him. The tentacles were full of erupting magma and terrifying mouthparts. Under the enhancement of the blood mist, the momentum seemed even more shocking. It should be some kind of sea creature similar to the emperor octopus that had received the abyssal power and mutated. At the same time, a large number of abyssal monsters appeared in the sky. They swarmed over like clouds, almost covering the blood-red sky. Shinrei punched out. This punch seemed ordinary and did not have any special power, but the blood sea in front of him rolled back, and a trench that could not be closed appeared. Those huge tentacles were instantly torn into pieces. While punching, he still maintained a leisurely flying speed, and punched into the distant sky. A crack appeared in the cloud of monsters in the sky, and this crack continued into the distance. Along the way, there were countless cracks, and the monsters in the crack range turned into ashes and dissipated. Shinrei punched while flying. He was not wasting his strength, but using this kind of punching to adjust his state, and further adapt to the pressure of the abyss world to prepare for a real battle. The monsters that kept gushing out from the horizon suddenly retreated, and the turbulent blood sea also stopped boiling. The environment that was roaring fiercely just now suddenly became silent. The motionless central part of the blood sea began to solidify into red crystals, turning into a crystal-clear bridge that extended forward. Shinrei looked at this crystal bridge. This should be the path to the final battlefield. At this moment, there was nervousness, solemnity, determination, and calmness in his heart. Although it had not been a long time since he was reborn into this world, he had experienced more than an ordinary person in several lifetimes, and he had many unique things. Not power, or glory, but people. Lovers who would not change until death, friends who would entrust their backs to him, and children whose blood was thicker than water. He had all of the most precious things in the world. His lovers and companions would burn their lives and fight side by side with him today, and there was also the concern and attention from his family and friends behind him. All he could do was fight with everything he had. Even if he turned into ashes, he would have no regrets in this life. Taking a deep breath, his figure landed on the bridge. Sure enough, there were no traps or abnormalities on the crystal bridge, but with his footsteps, the crystal bridge behind him began to collapse, indicating that this was a road of no return. Shinrei smiled and continued forward without fear. Chapter 1266. Shinrei stepped on the crystal bridge and walked across the icy sea. The crystal bridge did not break at the shore and extended all the way to the depths of the Plain of Nightmares. The aura of the abyss in the Plain of Nightmares was 10 times stronger than that of the icy sea. If it was an ordinary kingdomized expert, they would suffocate to death under the oppressive power in a few seconds in this terrible environment. There was flowing magma everywhere, and the original mountains and forests had long been turned into barren, scorched land. A large number of flowers of abyss floated in the magma, and huge abyssal nests stood tall. The Brood Mother was surrounded by countless blood cocoons. From afar, these blood cocoons looked like a boundless ocean. The blood cocoons, soaked in magma and under the aura of the flowers of abyss, quickly hatched into various abyssal monsters. They spread out, and the nest continued to produce new batches of blood cocoons. This was the reason why the abyssal army was endless. The abyssal monsters did not attack Shinrei, as if this enemy did not exist at all. This was due to the control of the will of the abyss, which was the true source of the power of the entire abyss. Unless the will of the abyss could be destroyed, even if Shinrei attacked and defeated all the nests now, it would be meaningless. The crystal bridge finally came to an end, the nightmare volcano. This position was also the end of the radiating blood clouds in the sky. In the void, there was a diamond-shaped opening that was emitting a scarlet light. It was like a closed eye, and the nearby space shot out beams of blood-colored light that fell on the ground below. The hills in front of the volcano had all turned into a huge open space. Countless red crystals condensed in the open space, shining brightly. In the center was a huge building. There were 3 large sculptures standing in the center of the building. The sculptures were not ordinary human figures. They looked a little abstract and had special power. Just a glance at them would make one shudder. At the same time, various negative emotions involuntarily arose in one's heart. Below the tallest sculpture in the center was an exaggerated and sinister throne. A woman casually reclined on the throne. She had a head of long blue hair and beautiful facial features. She wore a simple white robe and was barefooted. Her snow-white and sparkling thighs were placed on the armrest of the throne without any cover. In this kind of environment, she revealed a kind of bewitching beauty. The woman slowly opened her eyes. Both of her eyes were blood-red, but her right eye was slightly empty. The moment she opened her eyes, the crystal bridge beneath Chenrei's feet disappeared, and his body fell straight down. Chenrei didn't resist. He landed on the ground and immediately felt an unprecedented pressure. This was the true core of the abyss. Quiriana! Chenrei stared at the final and strongest enemy from afar. I didn't expect you to be able to come to this place after the gate of the two realms was sealed. What a surprising ability! Quiriana's voice sounded fresh and moving at first, but in Chenrei's ears it was like ice. Even the nearby space was about to freeze. The will of the abyss? Chenrei looked at the three sculptures and felt the powerful will and the throbbing in his soul. Yes. You did a great job. Not only did you close the gate of the abyss, but you also destroyed Sasbach and Delacero. But that's all. The will of the abyss will never be destroyed. If necessary, it can create new masters infinitely. Aquilina slowly sat up straight. You did a great job. Not only did you close the gate of the abyss, but you also stopped the invasion of the abyss army. Even Sasbach and Delacero were killed. So you're just a puppet that can be replaced at any time? In fact, the so-called eternity is just a bubble. There is no complete eternity in the universe, including the universe itself. Even if you're the former supreme existence or the gods, so what? The former immortality has turned into decay. Even if it survives in a certain form, it's no longer glorious. Chenrei faced the powerful coercion of the will of the abyss without evading. His eyes were full of insight. Although the two hadn't really started fighting, their words had already begun a confrontation. Quiriana shook her head. You still don't understand. As you can see, destruction is coming. But destruction is not the ultimate goal. After destruction, a new creation begins, and a new world is about to be born. Life and death are endless. This is also the truth of the universe. If you're willing to accept the greatest will, you can become the new master, and even further become the supreme master of the new world. And I, the woman who once loved you, will also kneel before you. You are you, she is she, and you will never be her. Chenrei frowned. Before I make the final decision, I want to know a truth that I've always been curious about. Since the gods have completely fallen, then why is the will of the abyss, which is a dark divinity, still able to exist? Quiriana looked at the clothes. In the sky and smiled meaningfully. Who told you that the gods have completely fallen? Chenrei was shocked. Could it be that those huge corpses were not dead? He remembered very clearly that in Lucifer's consciousness, he clearly saw the gods fall under the power of the summoned by the supreme key. Could it be? Just as he was distracted, Quiriana's figure on the throne suddenly disappeared. At the same time, Chenrei had a strong feeling of alarm. An extremely terrifying power was coming toward him. Quiriana had long seen through Chenrei's thoughts. Although she said that she wanted him to surrender, her subordinates did not hesitate to launch a surprise attack. Boom! Chenrei's body was blown away by the powerful shock. In the process of flying backward, he was suddenly wrapped in flames, and his body actually showed signs of collapsing. What kind of flame power was this? In the first two battles with Quiriana actually did not display her strongest state. Only when Ben-Hong triggered the explosion of the origin of the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction with his life did Quiriana really show her power. Not only did she retreat unscathed, but she also took away the two masters and the two books of origin. Now that they were on the home ground of the Abyss Kingdom, Quiriana naturally exerted her power to the extreme, and Chenrei was suppressed. Just a punch from the half-elf state made him encounter real danger. She was indeed the strongest master of the Abyss. She was also at the level of SSS++, but her power was far beyond that of Sasbach or Delacero. Quiriana caught up with Chenrei in the air and punched out again, intending to give him another fatal blow. Suddenly, she raised her eyebrows. Her body that was wrapped in flames suddenly became transparent, faintly revealing bright starlight. The flames outside seemed to have changed into another state, and they burned uncontrollably. In a muffled sound, her fist was actually caught. Not only that, the strength of the fist that was caught was beyond her expectation. Even Quiriana could not bear it. She groaned, and her blue hair and robe turned red at the same time. Her snow-white skin also began to turn red, and spider-web-like patterns appeared on her skin. In the gaps of the patterns, there was a glimmer of gold. She had already launched the first level of Abyss transformation. After this transformation, her power skyrocketed. Quiriana's arm shook, and she got out of the opponent's grasp. Her sharp fingernails slashed at Chunrei's throat, and the fingernails passed the target accurately. However, Chunrei did not react at all. This claw seemed to hit a phantom. It turned out that the opponent actually dodged it at high speed. Almost at the same time, there was a sharp pain in her abdomen, and she had been punched. The power of this punch was abnormally strong. The blood robe behind Quiriana suddenly bulged, and the part of the robe that was condensed by the power of Abyss was torn apart by the surging power. Quiriana covered her lower abdomen. When the next dangerous punch approached, she had already instantly left the battle and appeared far away. Her blood-red eyes stared at the enemy who was shining with starlight. Not counting the doppelganger, the first time she really fought with this person was in the Silver Moon Immortal Capital. At that time, his power could only be described as weak. Even when he joined forces with Michael and others, he was still easily defeated by her. If it weren't for the fact that Left Eye was schemed against by Alucier and was forced to leave, she would have killed him long ago. The second battle was in the White Sea. Compared with the first time, this person's strength had greatly increased, and he actually surpassed Delothro. However, the great light sword array with the power of the Book of Destruction was still defeated by her. But now, he alone could make her suffer such a loss when she used the first level of transformation. The potential and growth speed of this, Chunrei, was absolutely terrifying. Quiriana finally showed a dignified look. She tore off the blood robe on her body, revealing her naked body, but she didn't care about this. Her right eye began to burn, and flames instantly spread all over her body. In the flames, her body changed again. Sharp bone spurs began to extend from her shoulders and elbows, a tail appeared on her back, and a pair of bone wings appeared on her back. Her head also changed, growing 3 horns, which looked like a crown. The flames gradually converged, turning into a dark golden armor that covered her vital parts. At this moment, although Quiriana exuded a destructive aura that was dozens of times stronger than before, her temperament and appearance had a kind of strange beauty, faintly revealing an indescribable charm. She was like a witch from the underworld, using a beauty that did not belong to this world to control the magic box that could destroy everything. Chunrei's pupils shrank slightly. The second level Abyss transformation of Quiriana that he had seen before was not like this. And it didn't have such a powerful aura. Surprised? Quiriana's voice actually sounded from behind. After saying those 3 words, Chunrei's heart was filled with alarm, and he couldn't help but be shocked. This feeling was very similar to the power of the divine fragment that Rala activated in the elemental realm. It was no longer an ordinary power, but an existence that was close to authority. Chunrei was about to dodge, but his body suddenly trembled, and 5 knife-like fingernails had already pierced through his chest. Quiriana leaned close to his ear and whispered, "The last 2 times I had to divert my attention to suppress Alucier's power, so I didn't display my strongest state. The me you see now is the real me." This state of whispering seemed to be intimate between lovers, but her hand was stuck in his chest, which seemed strange and cruel. But soon, a strange glint flashed past Quiriana's blood-red eyes. She turned around abruptly, and her sharp claws caught a ball of dazzling light. However, her body was pushed back by the great force of the light. Her feet dragged 2 long trails on the solid crystal floor. Looking at the intact Chunrei behind her, Quiriana's eyes narrowed. She exerted force with her claws and pinched the cluster of light into nothingness. Her attention fell on the extra bright constellation flowing in the transparent body. She was slightly surprised. Death power? No, it's not simple power. It's also close to authority. Unfortunately, it's just barely close. That kind of power to avoid death definitely can't be used again in a short time. Chinrui didn't make a sound. What he just used was the power of Garadam's death constellation. At the critical moment, he avoided death with a special rule power. However, Quiriana's judgment was right. That power could no longer be used for the second time. It seems that this battle is much more interesting than I imagined. Let you, who has this kind of extraordinary power, become the best sacrifice. Quiriana's claws pointed to the sky, and the three statues on the huge building flew out several beams of light at the same time. The beams converged into one and penetrated into the diamond in the void. Two clusters of light appeared in the diamond, one black and one white. They rotated slowly, looking like the pupils in the eyes. Chinrui clearly sensed a familiar power breath in the light, and he blurted out, "Book of Creation. Book of Destruction." Chapter 1267. When the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction appeared in the eye of the void, the originally closed eye looked like it was opened. Chinrui clearly felt a special breath filling between heaven and earth. It seemed to extend to the entire world, causing some kind of change in the entire world. An ominous omen surged in his heart. However, he had no time to be distracted to feel it carefully because facing a terrifying opponent like Quiriana, any distraction was enough to be fatal. From the moment Quiriana's claws penetrated his chest, Chinrui had already cast the strongest, combustion. In this state, his power was not only maximized by all the deity positions in the super system, but he could also call upon the special power of any constellation. However, this highest intensity, combustion, came at the cost of several times the vitality. It was not only his own life, but also the lives of all his partners. Once it was burned out, he and all the people who integrated into the constellation would be annihilated. Although he avoided the death claw that was enough to penetrate the heart with the special power of Garadam's death constellation, it also sounded an alarm in Shinrei's heart. Next time, he might not be so lucky. Quiriana in her complete state, especially in this environment blessed by the will of the abyss, her combat power far exceeded expectations. If he was not careful, he would be annihilated. In fact, Shinrui and the entire world needed to be thankful. As Quiriana herself said, if it weren't for the legendary prophet Elusir's hidden plan in advance, facing Quiriana's terrifying combat power in her complete state from the beginning, the main plane wouldn't be able to persist until today. Now that the eye in the void had undergone some unpredictable changes, he could only try his best to defeat Quiriana as soon as possible. The figures flashed and intertwined at high speed, and the sound of fighting sounded everywhere. Various traces continued to appear in the landscape and space. Countless rifts appeared on the red crystal ground as if it was torn by a huge claw, but the center of the rift was not Shinrui, but Quiriana. The sharp wind pressure had stopped, but Quiriana's figure, which was as steady as a rock, began to flash rapidly as if the calm was the most dangerous moment. A moment later, the rapidly flickering thin shadow finally returned to its original form. However, there were a few obvious bloodstains from the neck to the face. The wounds weren't simply bleeding, but there were shocking green spots and pustules. Quiriana's blood-red eyes flashed, and her wounds quickly healed as if nothing had happened. The red crystal ground that had been damaged by the fierce battle also quickly recovered. Although this plague is powerful, it's a pity that it's like a sneeze to me. It's useless. Shinrui frowned. It was not the first time he had hit Quiriana. He had even added in Paglio's plague constellation, but it was a pity that it did not affect her at all. At the same time, he felt a sharp pain under his ribs. The star armor had already cracked a few horrifying holes, and the wounds kept bleeding, and the destructive power that contained the faith of the entire Abyss Kingdom was spreading out from the wounds. Quiriana's claws were strange and unpredictable. Even though most of the profound meaning of water had returned, it still missed a few hidden forces. From the outside, Chunrei was still the transparent star figure, but Quiriana had already sensed the spread of the power of the abyss. She sniffed the blood in the air, and a creepy smile appeared on her face. She said, "If the power of misfortune was still here, I wouldn't have been able to hit you like this. Unfortunately, although this power is wonderful, you can't use it again in a short time. Next, I will take your head as an offering to the new era." Chunrei took a deep breath, and the star power in his body quickly circulated again. A constellation in his transparent body lit up, and his whole body was immediately ignited with a black flame. This flame was full of vitality, and a pair of faint light wings appeared on his back, as if a phoenix was flapping its wings. The wound immediately recovered, and the strange power of the Abyss Kingdom that was trying to invade his body also quickly retreated under the special burning power. Quiriana's bloody eyes flashed, and before Chunrei could completely recover, her body turned into several bloody shadows, whistling over. The phoenix wings on Chunrei's back closed, turned into a crystal ball, and protected his body. Quiriana's bloody shadows dashed left and right, and the crystal ball kept cracking, but it did not break. In the crystal ball, Chunrei did not relax at all, but became even more serious, because wherever the bloody shadows passed by, a special power seeped into his body through the cracks, and his body suddenly became weak, slow, aged, numb, and other negative states. These negative states were actually caused by the power of the Abyss will, such as fear, despair, hatred, and other forces. It was not a purely physical effect, but deep in the heart, even the nirvana force of the Phoenix constellation could not completely get rid of it. The cracks on the protective crystal ball of the Phoenix constellation became bigger and bigger. Boom! It completely shattered. The bloody shadows rushed towards Chunrei from all directions, and merged into a bloody mist, instantly surrounding him, blocking out the starlight. After a few seconds, a ray of light lit up in the bloody mist. This light did not look particularly bright, but it revealed a kind of exciting power, like the dawn of dawn breaking through the darkness. The bloody mist was torn apart under this light, and with a muffled groan, the scattered bloody mist recondensed into the figure of Quiriana, but it looked incomplete. She looked cautiously at the gradually dissipating light in Chunrei's hand. This was the power of Tiffany's constellation, Dawn. In this dark kingdom full of hatred, fear, despair, even if it was just a glimmer, it represented the existence of hope. Although this power of Dawn could not disperse the power of the entire kingdom of the Abyss, it was more than enough to disperse the negative power in Chunrei's heart. What an amazing ability! Quiriana's incomplete body recovered again, and her deep eyes seemed to see through Chunrei. The power that you displayed is close to power. Let's call it pseudo-power for the time being. There are so many. Even at the level of God, generally speaking, they only have one or two kinds of power at most. If everyone is at the level of God, then I am not your opponent. Unfortunately, I am not. Chunrei quickly adjusted the power in his body. After fighting fiercely for so long, his life and power were being consumed extremely quickly, and he could not hold on for much longer. He had to defeat Quiriana as soon as possible. If you don't become a god, you will always be an ant. Quiriana shook her head. If it was another place, you might have a chance to defeat me, but unfortunately, this world has been completely covered by the will of the Abyss. I am truly immortal, just like a god. You don't even have a trace of hope. Oh yes, I almost forgot, you still have the supreme key, but I will not give you the chance to use it. Chunrei frowned, and with a low shout, his whole body emitted a sharp aura like the edge of a sword. With a bounce of his feet he flew out, and wherever he passed, the red crystal ground turned into powder. This sword mark went straight for Quiriana, and its power was several times stronger than before, as if it was not oppressed and weakened by the will of the Abyss. It was the power of Athena's war constellation. Quiriana felt the oppressive power of the battle. In her eyes, Chunrei's whole body was like an indestructible sword, and her face could not help but reveal a solemn expression. She did not take the attack head-on, and with a few consecutive movements, she pulled away from him. She grabbed at the air with her sharp claws, and the red crystals on the ground below were quickly sucked into her claws, turning into a huge whip, about 200 meters long and about 10 meters in diameter. The whip that was originally the most convenient for her had been destroyed in the Battle of the White Sea, and the power of this whip, especially its attack range, was even more shocking. The huge blood-red whip was like a huge snake, as if it was alive, whistling and pouncing at Chenrei. Even this extremely sturdy space, under this power, faint cracks appeared. Chenrei did not dodge, and the profound meaning of Athena's constellation power was to fight fearlessly. The moment the two collided, the huge snake that seemed to have swallowed Chenrei suddenly shook and stopped, and then countless cracks quickly spread up, the sword light broke out, and the huge snake's body was completely shattered. However, Quiriana, who was at the other end of the whip, disappeared, but there was a huge blood cloud in the sky, and countless raindrops that were like sharp blades fell, and the sturdy crystal ground was penetrated with dense holes. The sword light shot toward the clouds with an indomitable will. The blood cloud was originally invisible, but under the sharp sword light, it gradually turned into nothingness. Behind the sword light, Quiriana's real body finally appeared. Although the sword light was incomparably cold, it was extremely hard to break, especially at this time, when it was weakened and the edge was blunt. It was the best time to attack, and Quiriana had absolute confidence that she could destroy it. Just when the sharp claws successfully tore the figure and the sword light into pieces, Quiriana's face suddenly changed, and she felt her heart inexplicably tighten, and her body was actually unable to move. Quiriana could not believe it, because this binding power did not come from the outside, but from her own heart. Not only did the opponent mislead her judgment, but he also inconceivably triggered the strange feeling in her heart, as if she had lied to herself. That's right, deception. Isabella's constellation power. Chenrei's current integration of the burning constellation power was not only a direct increase in power, but it also had many unimaginable magical uses. Especially when he put aside everything and burned his life to fight, he had an unprecedented feeling and understanding of these magical uses and even the power of the entire astral god. This is the true supreme controller. Not only does he control the life, faith, and power of the universe, in the supersystem, but he also controls the gods. After deceiving Quiriana, Chenrei did not directly kill her because even in this kingdom full of the will of the abyss, even if he killed Quiriana, she would resurrect infinitely. Therefore, Chenrei's goal was not Quiriana, but the three statues that symbolize the will of the abyss. He couldn't judge what kind of power the eyes triggered by the statues and what kind of terrible changes would happen, but his instinct told him that he had an uneasy premonition. Only by completely destroying the will of the abyss could he stop all this. Only then could he truly defeat Quiriana and the shadow that shrouded the entire main plane. At the moment he flew toward the statues, his body, soul, and the constellation in his body burned at the same time. This blow had already burst out with all his strength, without the slightest leeway or reservation. With an indomitable determination and momentum, he rushed toward the huge building like a meteor burning with the most dazzling light of life. Above, the light of creation and destruction in the eyes, in the void gradually merged into one as if it was a real pupil. It flashed with indifferent light, overlooking the earth and the bright light that flew over. Chapter 1268. Quiriana finally broke free from the binding power of deceit, but it was too late to stop Chenrei, who was rushing to the three statues. The strange thing was that there was no panic on her face, but an unfathomable smile. Chenrei, who was burning with all his might, rushed to the statues that were still projecting light pillars with his strongest power. However, the moment he rushed into the three statues, he was surprised to find that his speed had slowed down, as if he had fallen into an ocean of mud. Everything, including the burning soul and life, slowed down. This was not a simple change in time, but the ultimate power that combined various rules such as time, space, destruction, creation, and so on. It was irresistible. After his vision was distorted, the scene in front of him changed. The statues and buildings were gone, but there was an endless void. A huge rhombus was faintly visible above his head, and the edge was a boundless blood-colored star that was distributed in a scattered manner. In the center of the rhombus were two huge flames, exuding the aura of destruction and creation. They were the source of all the light. The stars condensed into three constellation-like images, faintly showing the shape of a human face, distributed on three sides, facing each other from a distance. These three, human faces, seemed to be unreachable, but they seemed to be close at hand, exuding a strange aura. Shinrui was shaken, and the feeling of falling in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. The road ahead seemed to be endless, with no beginning and no end. His soul, body, and power were constantly decomposing and dissipating, and his consciousness began to gradually blur. Shinrui suddenly woke up, and his hands shone brightly. Countless whirlwind-like purple star fragments fluttered around him, and a strong storm spread out in all directions. This was the polar star storm that was integrated with Lolly's sky power, a powerful attack move with a large area of effect. However, the overwhelming stardust storm still fell into it. In this vast space, it was like a breeze that blew past, and it disappeared without a trace in a moment. This scene made Shinrui's heart secretly shudder. With a loud shout, 3 flame dragons surrounded by rainbow light flew out and attacked the 3 huge human-faced constellations respectively. However, it was still like a clay ox entering the sea. The rainbow flame dragons flew farther and farther, but they couldn't touch the target. They gradually disappeared as they advanced. Quiriana's figure appeared in the constellation directly in front of him. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and the huge faces of the 3 constellations revealed a corresponding smile at the same time. "You finally can't hold it in anymore?" Quiriana licked the trace of blood on her fingernails, and her smile became even more sinister. "I originally thought that you would wait for a while before attacking the throne. For you, completely turning into ashes in this universe formed by the will of the abyss is an ideal ending. This is the universe? At most, it's just a small star region." Shinrui sneered, and he had a faint ominous feeling that he had fallen into the trap. In this space that was originally a vast starry sky, the constellations in the sky couldn't be used, and the soul and power were also rapidly dissipating. If he didn't try to change anything, even if Quiriana didn't make a move, sooner or later, he would be completely annihilated. Quiriana didn't give him too much time to react. The blood-red light of the 3 constellations shone brightly, and the speed of power loss suddenly increased by 10 times. Shinrui looked up at the Book of Destruction and the Book of Creation that were like the sun and the moon. He secretly clenched his fists, and the last of his power was boiling. His whole body was burning with a bright flame. The rule power of the nearby space seemed to have been rehearsed again. From the uncontrollable strangeness to order, he felt the pressure suddenly lightened, and his spirit was greatly refreshed. This was Delia's power of order. Unfortunately, this power of order was limited after all. It couldn't spread out in this powerful star region to change the rules of the entire force, and it couldn't last for too long. Shinrui's goal was not to use the rule power to change the entire space, but to protect himself and complete the last and biggest attack. His target was the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction in the sky. Destruction and creation were originally 2 completely opposite powers. Currently, the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction were the core power of the entire world's mutation because of the power of the abyss maintaining a delicate balance. What he wanted to do was to use his own origin of creation and origin of destruction as a guide to break that balance. Just like what Ben Hong did last time, to trigger the collision of the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction. This would create an extremely powerful destructive force, and completely destroy the will of the abyss. Quiriana discovered Shinrui's intention and snorted coldly. The pressure of the nearby space doubled, but it still couldn't break the protection of order. She frowned and pointed her finger again. Countless blood-red meteors whistled and chased after Shinrui. They were so fast that they were even faster than Chenrui, and they caught up to him even though they started later. Seeing that Chenrui was about to be hit by the red meteor shower, his body suddenly flashed, and a purple starlight scattered, turning into a huge shadow, crazily attacking, or more accurately, biting, at the meteor shower. The meteor shower was swallowed up in the blink of an eye, and under Quiriana's strange gaze, it rushed straight into the huge diamond. At this moment, the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction both disappeared. He only felt that the surroundings were filled with incomparably rich origin of creation and origin of destruction. Not only did the two origin of strength in his body not break the balance, but they also left his body and were assimilated by the sucking. At the same time, Chenrui felt an ancient and great aura coming towards him. Immortality, immortality, various thoughts involuntarily emerged in his mind. This feeling was somewhat familiar. Chenrui's heart moved, and he already remembered where he had felt this aura. The end of the mysterious place, also known as the Forbidden Land by Ben Hong and the others, the Realm of Chaos. There was actually the aura of the Realm of Chaos here? The next second, Chenrui's pupils suddenly shrank, because a huge corpse appeared in front of him. The corpse exuded an indescribable aura, and upon closer inspection, it was a huge dim galaxy. Chenrui was shocked. It was actually, there was more than one corpse, and there were more in the distance. Chenrui clearly sensed that the corpse seemed to be absorbing the surrounding origin of creation and destruction power. He suddenly remembered the changes that he saw in the surface world when he came here, and his heart suddenly came to a realization. Previously, the space of the floating land had overlapped, and now it was the realm of chaos. The first battle of the gods, the supreme curse, the divinity of darkness. The second battle of the gods, the twilight of the gods, the fall of the gods. Then, the final goal of the will of the abyss. Chenrui's heart shook, and he saw that the dim and silent galaxy actually began to shine with starry light, and a terrifying pressure spread out. This power was more than 1,000 times stronger than Quiriana's power. Chenrui only felt that his soul was under unprecedented pressure, and all his power was imprisoned, almost completely collapsing. At this moment, his vision distorted again, and he returned to the space of the blood-red star again. The sky was still that huge rhombus, and the eye that had just disappeared, the art of creation and the book of destruction were still in it. Chenrui was very clear that what happened just now was not an illusion. His body still retained that terrifying pressure, and his soul and body were in an extremely weak state, and he could not gather his power for a while. Even if he had many magical uses and techniques of pseudo-power, he still could not resist this absolute suppression. This was the difference of quality. Quiriana's figure appeared in the blood-red constellation in front of him, and at this moment, her body began to slowly merge into the constellation behind her, and the other two constellations were also undergoing some kind of change, and the stars at the edge gradually converged, forming a huge circle. Your judgment and choice are very accurate, and your strategy is also successful. You also have enough courage, but you lack the most important factor, strength. That is indeed the core of the entire world. If you can defeat it, you can completely defeat me, destroy the entire will of the abyss, and save your world. But there is a prerequisite, and that is to have power above it. You want to resurrect them? Chenrui recalled the encounter just now and seemed to have understood something. No, this is not resurrection. You cursed dark divinity are trying in vain to use the power of the Book of Destruction and the Book of Creation to occupy the bodies of the gods and obtain a new life. Occupy? There is one most important thing that you have misunderstood. Quiriana laughed as if she had heard the funniest thing in the world, and her laughter was full of undisguised ridicule. They are just returning to their own bodies. You mean? Chenrui understood what Quiriana meant, and revealed a look of disbelief. Quiriana sneered and said, Sad guy, let me tell you the biggest truth. The so-called dark divinity and the so-called will of the abyss that you speak of are actually them themselves. Chenrui was shocked. It was Michael who risked his life to tell him about the battle of the gods, and because of that, his life and soul were destroyed under the restrictions of the taboo. Now, Quiriana actually said the complete opposite of the truth. But he did not say anything. Instead, he waited for Quiriana to further unravel this horrifying truth, and at the same time, he was also waiting for more time to break free from this terrible coercion. Back then, after Lucifer activated the Supreme Key and launched the Twilight of the Gods, they should have fallen, and logically speaking, the dark divinity should have been annihilated. However, by relying on some kind of supreme power of the supreme curse, their wills were resurrected. It's just that, they've changed into another form of existence. The Abyss! Shinrei finally came to a realization. It turned out that after the gods fell, they actually relied on the supreme god's curse to survive in the form of the will of the Abyss. In other words, the will of the Abyss was the will of the gods. The real culprit who wanted to destroy all life turned out to be the gods that were believed and revered by all life in this world. This was a shocking truth that completely subverted his understanding. Chapter 1269. Demon Realm. Shilanya held her green leaf staff and looked at the sky. Not only her, but almost everyone in the demon realm also raised their heads. The dark clouds above their heads that had been suppressed for several months had undergone an obvious change in form. They had become exactly the same as the ground. Different from the vague and indistinct appearance before, the current appearance had become extremely clear. Even the moving figures were exactly the same, just like the reflection of themselves in the mirror. Most people did not understand what this change meant, but the increasing pressure made everyone have an ominous feeling in their hearts. Some people had already made various attempts to change or destroy these reflections, but it was all in vain. In the space of the nightmare volcano, Quiriana looked at Shinrei with interest and said, "That's strange. I don't see any subversion or collapse of faith in your eyes, only shock. I've only seen such a true godless will in the eyes of one person, the incarnation of the Supreme Key, which is also the blasphemer who created the Twilight of the Gods." Lucifer is the incarnation of the Supreme Key? There was too much information in Quiriana's words. Shinrei could not help but ask, "What about you? If the will of the Abyss is the will of the gods, what are you?" "I am the executor of all wills, which means I am the highest oracle. I have used the power of life sacrifice from many planes, and after countless attempts, I finally infiltrated a trace of will into the power barrier of the main plane. This trace of will caused the main plane to have the faith of the Abyss, and it continuously absorbed all kinds of dark and negative energy, making the will even greater and stronger. Originally, it would only take another 100 years for the Abyss to completely control the power barrier, and use the power of the barrier to completely devour all the lives on the main plane. However, that despicable fate attendant actually opened the door to the main plane in advance and triggered a change in the authority barrier, causing the power of will in the authority barrier to be annihilated. I had no choice but to fuse with the body of this descendant, and my will and my power were greatly weakened. Otherwise, how could you have obtained so many opportunities?" At the mention of a certain prophet who had plotted against her after his death, Quiriana seemed to be gnashing her teeth, and her tone changed again. She said, "However, I can't understand Elusier's approach. Did he think that the destruction 100 years later was irreversible, and that opening the barrier now could change the outcome? In the end, it was just a waste of effort, and he even ruined the last 100 years of this world's existence." Shinrei finally understood. It turned out that the culprit, who opened the enchantment in advance and caused the Abyss to invade, was actually the legendary prophet, Elusier. And the true purpose of opening the barrier was to destroy the plot of the Abyss to use the power barrier to directly devour all the lives on the main plane 100 years later. The faith of the Abyss, including the mysterious church, the Black Death Apostles, the main altar, and so on, appeared in the main plane not by chance, but the result of the power barrier being infiltrated by the will of the Abyss. And Blanche's shell was obviously a backup plan just in case. Even if the Abyss did not come, in the next 100 years or so, Blanche would have awakened, and further spread the faith and power of the Abyss. Because of Elusier's actions, although the will of the Abyss and Quiriana arrived in advance, their power was greatly weakened. Otherwise, they would not have been able to resist until today. Just like in the mirror world, Alucia was taking a gamble, and the gamble was even bigger, not only her own life, but also the life of the entire world, and the person who could influence the final gamble was very likely to be Chunrui, the person who had been schemed against all along. Before Chunrui could think about it, he suddenly felt alarmed. He saw that his body was already covered with strands of blood-red starlight, densely intertwined like a huge spider web, and the source of the starlight was the three major constellations where Quiriana was. The Scarlet Spider Array, the highest level of sacrificial array to offer sacrifices to the gods. Quiriana's figure appeared less than 2 meters in front of Chunrui. Her whole body seemed to have merged with the blood-red starlight, and her silhouette became illusory, but one could still see the sarcastic sneer. The blood-red starlight from all directions wrapped around Chunrui like lightning. In the process, it was not that Chunrui did not think of dodging or defending, but the countless thoughts of resistance in his heart were extinguished by the intertwining starlight. In an instant, his body was penetrated by the intertwining starlight. The first feeling that Chunrui felt was not pain, but some kind of strange fusion, as if his own soul and the huge blood-red spider web had merged into one. But the next second, he felt that something was wrong, as if he was dismembered into countless pieces, scattered in all directions along the lines of the spider web, and his life began to rapidly weaken. The only shortcoming of this array is that it takes a long time to prepare, which is why I have been talking nonsense with you for so long. I know that you are also stalling for time, trying in vain to get rid of the pressure of the Chaos Realm, but unfortunately, that is not ordinary power, but true divine power. With your strength, you cannot dispel it. Quiriana's bloody eyes flashed with a frightening light. Actually, in the depths of my consciousness, it seems that I do not resist talking nonsense with you. It is hard to believe that she, who has been assimilated by me, still has such feelings. In order to completely put an end to the past, I will personally take away everything from you. As soon as her voice fell, Quiriana turned into a dazzling blood-red light and flew towards Chunrui. Chunrui tried to block, but the blood-red light passed through. At the moment of passing through, his soul seemed to be torn apart, and his body was stripped away. In the transparent body that had fused with the power of the star gods, the light of a constellation suddenly dimmed. Chunrui could clearly feel that the power of the plague constellation was actually uncontrollably separated from his body. In the star-conferring platform, the light of Paglio's star god statue quickly quieted down, and the star god statue began to show signs of collapse. Ben Hong's kind of deprivation is more of an elimination, but what I am using now is the true deprivation, or should I call it seizure. Quiriana, who had returned to human form from the blood-red light, laughed coldly. I admit that your strength is beyond my imagination, so much so that I am actually unable to kill you directly. But in this great array, even that fake power that can avoid death will not let you get away with it again. All of your fake power will be absorbed by the new gods, and when the time comes, they can be promoted to true power, making them even more powerful. The blood spider mandala formation could actually steal other people's power. Chunrui could feel that the star god statue of Paglio was showing signs of life and imminent danger. He gritted his teeth, as though he was forcefully suppressing the raging divine might in his body. At the same time, his entire body erupted with a light that was like a tidal wave, surging out. This was the domain of winter that was displayed using the power of the ocean constellation. Wherever the light passed, countless ice-cold crystals appeared on the spider silk and solidified. However, the spider silk faintly emitted a red light, and the solidified power was instantly evaporated into nothingness. The starlight on Chunrui's body changed into a few more forms, but he was still unable to break free from the spider web. Instead, the divine might that he had forcefully suppressed previously exploded out even more fiercely. His body emitted an explosive sound, and he had suffered heavy injuries. He had almost completely lost the ability to resist. It's useless. All of the attacks that you used on me before have already been seen through by the will. They will not have any effect in this blood spider mandala formation, and can only be stolen one by one. Quiryana's voice instantly approached, and once again penetrated his body. On the star-conferring platform, Jiao's star god statue quickly dimmed just like Paglio's. Chenrei's heart was filled with anger and pain, but the divine might in his body was too oppressive. Especially the backlash from before, it had destroyed all of his remaining strength. Adding on the strange power of the blood spider mandala formation, even if he wanted to perish together with his opponent, it was impossible. I said before, you are a sacrifice. The best sacrifice to the great will. Hate. Fear. Despair. Quiryana's voice echoed around, and the starlight on Chenrei's body rapidly weakened under the continuous penetration of the bloody light. The power of constellations in the sky was gradually stripped away, and his body had turned from transparent to semi-transparent. Because of the heavy injuries, the bloody body was faintly visible, and the light was getting dimmer. In contrast, the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction in the sky were getting brighter and brighter. As if they had obtained the faith, life, and power of constellations from Chenrei, the eyes in the void began to change, and gradually became the chaotic world. The seemingly vague corpse was slowly entering this space, becoming clearer bit by bit, and at the same time, the recovering starlight in the galaxy was also becoming clearer. The two spaces began to overlap. At this time, the mirror in the sky of the demon world also moved, slowly extending downwards bit by bit. The people on the ground instinctively felt the arrival of danger, and all stopped moving, looking at the gradually sinking reflection in surprise. The artificial moon in the sky was swallowed by the reflection, and the whole world fell into darkness and chaos. People. Mom, what should we do? A human little girl looked at the approaching haze above her head and hugged her mother in horror. I don't know, maybe the only thing we can do is to pray to the God of Light. More and more prayers sounded. In the face of irresistible despair, people could only turn to the gods they believed in, even though they had been silent for many years. Even though they turned a deaf ear. Do you hear these prayers? The last elegy of this world. Quiryana looked at the dim starlight of Chenrei and laughed. Is about to end. The last question. Chenrei seemed to have given up all resistance. Why destroy? Destruction is to recreate the supreme power and glory of the past, and to create a new order. Destruction and creation are originally the unchanging principle of this universe. To put it bluntly, destroying all life is just to restore their own strength. This is the so-called gods. Chenrei exposed the cruel essence behind the high-sounding words and shook his head. How many lives and civilizations have been annihilated because of this? The meaning of life is elimination, natural selection, survival of the fittest. The inferior ants can only live in the world because of the kindness of the superior. The law of the jungle is their unchangeable fate. Quiryana sneered. Being weak is originally the most unforgivable sin. You don't even have this kind of awareness. Even if you are given another billions of years, it will be difficult for you to surpass yourself and reach that realm. This is surpassing? Chenrei looked at the huge corpse in the distance and closed his eyes. Billions of years. No, you are wrong. If it is this kind of surpassing, I will never be able to reach that level. Be completely annihilated with this world. You don't have any luck left. Quiryana's body once again turned illusory, wanting to launch the most powerful attack. Suddenly, her movement stopped, and so did her eyes. A pair of blood-red eyes stared closely at Chenrei's hand. There was a card there, the face of which was the magic card of the King of Darkness. The pattern on the back was the Supreme Key. The Supreme Key was the key to open the seventh silver box, which was also the strongest key, the Book of Life and Death. Lucifer said that using it would destroy everything. The atmosphere suddenly froze. However, the Supreme Key suddenly disappeared again. Chenrei slowly opened his eyes. You have been leading me. At the last moment of life and death, this strange sentence made Quiryana's expression change. Chapter 1270. You're afraid of the Supreme Key. No, it's the will that's afraid of it. Shenrui was no longer angry or desperate. Instead, he was unprecedentedly calm. From the beginning of the battle, when you were sure that you couldn't kill me directly, you guided me to use this trump card. Did you want me to use it in advance? Or is there a special way to contain it here? Quiriana's bloody pupils constricted. Shenrui's voice became calmer. If I guessed correctly, those corpses had actually awakened before I came, and not when the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction rose into the sky. However, their power did not recover. As you said before, sacrificing all the lives on the main plane to create the so-called New Order is the price needed to recover. The Book of Creation and Book of Destruction should also be a very important part. So, in the Battle of the White Sea, you were willing to be seriously injured to take them away. Looking at Quiriana, whose eyes were full of hostility, Shenrui knew that even if he didn't guess it completely correctly, he was not far from it. In the Battle of the Demon Realm, the reason why you didn't appear was not because of your injuries, but because of the recovery of the will. That's why the world on the surface was changed to this state. Of course, in your eyes, we had already lost the Book of Destruction and Book of Creation. Just Sosbach and Delothro were enough to destroy everything. Just now, you released the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction to lure me into the Chaos Realm. Then, you didn't hesitate to give me time to breathe and even explain those secrets. You wanted to create an illusion in me and make me use the Supreme Key. However, they were too afraid of the Supreme Key's power. They didn't even dare to kill me directly for fear of triggering the Book of Life and Death. They just used their divine power to crush my power and send me back here for you to deal with. Even if there was a chance, they wouldn't be the ones annihilated. To put it bluntly, you're just a pathetic puppet. By the way, maybe they wanted to use you to seize my Supreme Key. It's too late to realize it now. Quiriana's blood-red eyes flickered with flames. This is a conspiracy, and it's also an open conspiracy. Now that your soul has been severely injured by the divine might, and you're trapped in the scarlet blood spider formation, you've lost most of your strength. I don't know if you still have the ability to use the Supreme Key. Regardless of whether you use it or not, I will give you the final blow right now and take everything from you. The three constellations lit up at the same time, and all the energy in the space fused into Quiriana's body. The complete form of Quiriana was burning with destructive flames, and terrifying bone spikes spread out, as though a huge spider queen was preparing to hunt for its prey in the spider's web. In the next second, the red light charged at Shenrui in an unprecedented manner. Quiriana's words were not exaggerated. It was a conspiracy before, and now it was an open conspiracy. He had already lost most of his power. Even if he could see through the intent of the will, even if he had any other tricks up his sleeve, it would all be futile in the face of absolute power. The paramount key might be his last hope. Facing this fatal blow, what should he do? Or not use it? Demon Realm. After the reflection engulfed the light in the sky, it continued to sink. The highest peak of the Demon Realm, Serene Peak, which was 20,000 meters above sea level, was the first to come into contact with the reflection after the artificial moon. The moment it came into contact with itself, in the mirror, Serene Peak and the reflection collapsed at the same time. Countless people saw this scene on the magic television, and all of them were horrified. People finally knew what the reflection would bring. Everyone in the whole world would follow the footsteps of Serene Peak and be annihilated together with their own shadows. There was no way to go, no place to escape. Grandpa, when will Mom and Dad come back? Duo bit her finger and asked Rex, who had a solemn expression. Upon hearing the two most familiar names of Mom and Dad, Daudu, who was in Fei Er's arms, also shook her head and tried to find the two closest people. Unfortunately, she didn't find them. Looking at the shadow of death sinking bit by bit in the sky, Rex touched the little girl's hair and forced a smile. It should be soon. Yeah. Ogula sighed. He will come back with Oliphius and Lala Arya. And Rala. Maria snuggled in Spin's arms, and Palgoris and Sophia also held each other tightly. In the distant Bloody Empire, Raisin stood quietly at the entrance of the palace hall. He didn't look at the sky, but he just looked at the empty throne. Further away in the sacred mountain, Satan, whose white hair was fluttering, looked up at the sky. His eyes were lonely just like that time. The shining red light penetrated Shinrei's body like lightning. There was no kind of destructive momentum, and it was even unobstructed. Quiriana's figure appeared behind Shinrei. Looking at Shinrei, who had completely disappeared under the starlight, she sneered. "It turns out to be just a bluff, you are simply." Shinrei's calm voice sounded. "From the beginning, I didn't intend to use it." "Then you only have a dead end." Before he finished speaking, Quiriana's face suddenly changed. "What did you do?" "I just took a gamble and gave you the last power," Shinrei said faintly. "The difference is that it was not seized by you, but returned. This power is divinity." Quiriana covered her head, and the three huge constellations in the distance also began to distort. "This is not my power, but the will of the abyss, which is the so-called gods." Shinrei glanced at the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction in the sky, and he said faintly, "You have the protection of the will, and you are immortal. Even my ability cannot completely destroy you. There is only one way to defeat you, and that is the power of the will itself. How can you?" Quiriana's body trembled, and the spider silk that surrounded Shinrei began to weaken rapidly. "There is one thing you are wrong about. I actually didn't break free from the divinity before, but I chose the riskiest devour. Although I could only devour a part of it. As you can see, it even caused an explosion due to the backlash, and I was almost completely annihilated. But this time, I won the gamble in the end." Shinrei was using mirror body, but it was by no means a simple mirror body. In the previous battle, he had used star conversion, and he also had that kind of rebound damage from revenge, but it was not a real threat to Quiriana. This mirror body was a combination of the divinity power of devouring and the power of all the remaining constellations. Shinrei's attainments in ancient runes and magic circles had reached the level of a guru. After experiencing several snatches, he had already faintly seen through the mystery of the blood spider formation. This formation was powerful and ingenious, and its mystery was not to directly snatch the ability, but to use the powerful will to suppress the consciousness and strangle the soul. The trapped person's soul was severely damaged, and the subjective consciousness could not perform the opposite ability. In addition to the original power of devouring life and soul, it created the power to snatch. Under the restriction of this power, if he really used the supreme key, his consciousness would also be suppressed. Not only could he not perform it, but it would also be snatched away. So, the real goal of the divinity power and the blood spider formation was the supreme key. Obtaining the supreme key that controlled the book of life and death was the biggest goal of the abyss. Although Shinrei saw through the mystery of the blood spider formation, and he would not fall into the trap of using the supreme key, he still could not get rid of its power. The various constellation powers that he used in the previous battle were indeed suppressed and could not be used, but he still had other non-combat constellations. For example, Adeline's, music, Samuel's, loyalty, Kia's, love, Alice's, life, and so on. All the constellation powers were integrated into the divinity power that he devoured, and they were all reflected to Quiriana in the form of a mirror body. This was also his last power. Even if her body was torn into pieces, she would still be fine. But now, she screamed in agony, clutching her head tightly as though she was suffering from excruciating pain. The human faces of the three major constellations in the distance also showed distorted expressions. Their facial features began to blur, and the stars inside them began to explode and extinguish. The blood spider formation around Shinrei had completely collapsed, and the constellation powers that were seized gradually returned to his body. Under the suppression of the divinity power and the formation, the star god statues that were originally connected with his soul and were heavily damaged also began to slowly recover. However, he did not feel relieved because of this. Quiriana had not fallen yet, and at least she had the power to make the final blow. There was still a greater enemy in the void that deserved more vigilance. In Chinrei's hand, he secretly held the supreme key. However, at this time, the void that seemed to be overlapping gave him a strange feeling, and that was emptiness. Emptiness. Quiriana's painful howl suddenly stopped, and the hands that were covering her head also slowly loosened. Chinrei sensed something and did not look at the void anymore. On that vaguely delicate face, the blood-red color in the right eye quickly dissipated, and it returned to its original blue color. What was different from the previous few times was that this blue color was no longer empty. Instead, it was as tranquil as the lake in the forest, and the blood-red color in the left eye seemed weak and dim. Her body was trembling, and from the intense distortion of the three major constellations behind her, one could tell that she was suffering at this moment. However, her trembling was not because of pain. The current her would not tremble because of loyalty, love, life, and so on. She would only be more clear-headed. Chinrei stared at that pair of eyes and finally revealed a smile. "Welcome back." These 4 words made Quiriana's body stop trembling. She saw that there was something in Chinrei's hand, and he handed it over. It was not a weapon, but a pair of glasses. Judging by his Grand Master's level of mechanics, this pair of ordinary glasses was not an outstanding work. However, for Quiriana, this was the most precious thing in the world. Once she thought she had lost it, and now it was back in front of her. Before she sank into the nightmare, she left behind this precious object and memory. At that time, he found it in the volcanic cave, took it away, and kept it until today. At this moment, she felt as if time had stopped, and only the hand that was slowly reaching for the glasses. With sharp nails, terrifying, monstrous claws. This was her hand? In her blue right eye, tears flowed down. Chapter 1271. The sharp claws hesitated for a moment, and finally reached for the glasses again. At this moment, the blood-red color in the left eye flared up again, and the 3 huge constellations faintly revealed their roaring faces. A strong voice shouted in her mind, "Kill him!" Quiriana screamed, and the claws that reached for the glasses slashed at Chinrei's throat. The speed was as fast as lightning. In her soul, the flow of time seemed to be extremely slow. Countless consciousness, countless scenes, flashed by. Kill him! The irresistible will, from the moment she was born, was integrated into her life. This was fate. She had fought against it more than once, but in the end, she could not reverse fate, and completely sank in destruction and hatred. She did not talk much with him. From the time she met him, including the sentence just now, he said a total of 36 sentences. Every word in the memory, every warmth was remembered in her heart. "This is a pair of magic glasses that I made temporarily. You will come back, right?" "I will definitely. I will wait for you." Hatred and destruction soon covered all of these. It was an inescapable, endless destiny. This remnant of her soul did not live for the sake of existence. She just wanted to see him again. "Kill him! Kill him!" The voice sounded again. Irresistible, fate. You don't have to hate, because in your eyes there is more than hate. The claws swung out with all her strength. Just to touch the distant warmth. Chinrei's gaze froze. The moment Blanche's claws approached his throat, she suddenly paused, and then suddenly stabbed into her own blood-red left eye. Something seemed to break in the left eye, and countless flaming blood burst out. The 3 constellations that showed the roaring expression before completely collapsed with a shrill explosion. Chinrei flew over with all his strength, and desperately caught the falling figure. That vaguely delicate face was full of boiling blood, and both eyes could not open, but his expression was extraordinarily calm. For the first time in his life, he was so calm. "Blanche! Blanche! Is it over?" His voice was calling her name. Unfortunately, she couldn't speak. She didn't even have the strength to look at him. His body became lighter and lighter. I really want to see him. What was that warm feeling? His tears? Finally, he felt the warmth of his dreams. She thought she had lost him, but he had never left her side. And that inescapable fate was getting further and further away. In my eyes, Chinrui hugged the slowly thinning body, and tears blurred his vision. Neither potions, tools, or abilities were omnipotent. Blanche's consciousness and soul had long since become one with the will of the abyss, and could not be separated. From the moment she destroyed her own soul, her most basic origin collapsed, just like how Michael and Gabriel were annihilated. "I will take you home, our home." Chinrui kissed the face that had almost disappeared. Home. She seemed to have sensed it and heard it. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, and then she completely vanished into thin air. All that was left was a red light floating in the air. It was a damaged red crystal ball. There were even dried blood stains on it. It was the last thing she left him. Chinrui slowly and carefully held the crystal ball in his hand. He closed his eyes as if he could still feel the pain at that moment. Not only physically, but also in the depths of his soul. But there was something that surpassed all the pain. That was love. When he opened his eyes again, the space in the Scarlet Galaxy had completely disappeared, and the scene returned to the Nightmare Volcano. What was different from before was that the giant eye, the Book of Creation, and the Book of Destruction had all disappeared, leaving behind only the giant altar. The 3 statues on the altar had collapsed like the 3 constellations in the Scarlet Galaxy. The abyssal monsters had also disappeared. However, the abyssal monsters weren't the most worrisome factor right now. In the sky, the original blood clouds had disappeared and were replaced by a reflection that resembled the demon world. The reflection was rapidly approaching the ground at an even faster speed than before. This was the most terrifying crisis. The entire main plane was facing the greatest calamity of all time. Although Blanche's body and soul had been destroyed, and she could not even speak in her final moments, she deliberately left a trace of consciousness in the crystal ball and told him the biggest secret. The will of Abyss had indeed begun to recover a long time ago. The reason was that it had used the power of the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction to absorb the countless destroyed life forces on the surface. However, this recovery was only in the initial stage. It was still far from complete recovery, and it needed to constantly consume power to activate its dormant body, which was the huge corpse that Chinrui saw. Because of this, it was eager to devour the life and origin of the entire main plane. Similarly, it had to maintain the state of its body, and it could not divert too much power at the moment. Unless it had been annihilated once and almost completely lost its eternal and immortal power, the fear of the Supreme Key was far beyond imagination. After sensing Chinrui's appearance on the surface, out of caution, the Will of Abyss did not face him personally. Instead, it immediately left the Nightmare Volcano and went to the Chaotic Realm. Before leaving, the Will of Abyss had left behind the final Godly Might projection and the Blood Spider formation, with the purpose of allowing Quiriana to obtain the Supreme Key. Therefore, Quiriana had been trying to lure Chinrui into using the Supreme Key. Chinrui's guess was right. If he had really used the Supreme Key, there would only be one result: it would have been snatched away. He had guessed wrong that the Will of Abyss had left prematurely. The chaotic realm that he saw before that was about to merge was actually just a projection. Its purpose was naturally to lure him into using his final trump card. That was why there was that feeling of emptiness later, because the godly might that supported the space had already been exhausted during the attack. After sensing the collapse of Quiriana's power, the Will made a prompt decision to further activate the power of the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction at the expense of overdrawing its power that had yet to fully recover. It wanted to destroy the entire main plane in advance, including Chinrui, who held the Supreme Key. Even if they could not kill Chinrui, as long as they destroyed all life on the main plane and recovered their true power, it would be a piece of cake to kill Chinrui. Just in case, before speeding up the destruction of the world, they did something even more decisive, which was to seal off the mysterious land. However, these wills, who thought that they had everything under control, were ultimately unable to grasp everything. For example, human nature. Or for example, the Stargate. the UFO land. A gate shining with faint starlight opened. When Chinray entered the UFO land, his soul felt a strange vibration, as if he had sensed some kind of strong fluctuation of consciousness. Countless images that had never been seen before quickly flashed past his mind. A fierce battle. The sky was filled with countless strong lights that danced and crisscrossed. There were many familiar figures, angels, fallen angels, dragons, elves. They were not the controlled mass-produced monsters like the Abyss, but real lives with their own consciousness. For the fanatical faith in their eyes, they fought without regard for their own lives. In a flash of light, hundreds and thousands of super-level experts were instantly annihilated, including those with pseudo-god level strength. The scale, level, and intensity of such a battle would be unimaginable if he had not seen it with his own eyes. Chinray instantly understood. A battle of the gods. Although he did not see any gods, if it was any other era in the future, it would be impossible for there to be so many experts. At the same time, he also vaguely understood why Michael, Satan, and those who had experienced the battle of the gods wanted to become gods at all costs. Even a peak pseudo-god level existence could fall at any time in such a battle, not to mention ordinary experts. Everyone was just cannon fodder and chess pieces in the game of the gods, unless they became the gamblers. The illusion of the fierce battle flashed past Chinray's mind. The next moment, a tide of wandering souls appeared in front of him. The white figures almost filled his entire vision, and they swarmed toward Chinray. There seemed to be some changes in the mysterious land. The rules that restricted the strength of demigods and above were gone, and there were many more powerful existences among the wandering souls. Chinray knew that these wandering souls were formed from the souls of the battle of the gods. Now, they were definitely attacking under the will of the gods. He did not want to fight with these souls, and he did not have time to waste here. The outside world was facing its final crisis. He took out the cracked red crystal ball and crushed it. The surrounding space suddenly distorted strangely, and a vertical whirlpool door appeared in front of him. This was the only privilege that Quiriana, as the highest oracle, received. It allowed her to directly enter the final realm of chaos in the mysterious land. It was also the real reason why Blanche left him the crystal ball. She did not know that he could directly go to the UFO land, but she left her last hope and wish to him. Bring her home. This was the promise that Chinray gave to her, to Duo, to all his relatives and friends. Without hesitation, he flew into the whirlpool. At the moment when Chinray entered the next space, before he could see the situation in front of him clearly, countless powerful forces came from all directions. The level of these forces was far beyond what he could bear, and it was not something that the power of Constellation could resist. Even if he could resurrect 10,000 times, he would be instantly turned into ashes. The source of the power was those huge corpses. Chinray could not resist, but there was light in his hand. The magic card. King of Darkness. At this time, he did not hesitate to use the supreme key. At this moment, time and space seemed to stand still, including all the surging power. When the blood-red light shone through the entire realm of chaos, Chinray did not see any light. He seemed to have entered another world. It was chaos. Drowsy, lifeless, and without light. It was full of stagnation and dead silence. Everything seemed to be destroyed. This scene made Chinray feel inexplicably familiar. Is this what the world looks like after it is destroyed? Could it be that the Supreme Key just now made the entire world? Wait, no. This familiarity is the super system. To be more precise, it was the chaotic state of the super system at the beginning, before the universe was born. Why is it in this place? Where is the realm of chaos? Where is the will of the gods? Just when Chinray was surprised, an indescribably powerful origin power appeared in the chaos and seemed to be brewing. Then, a violent vibration and explosion occurred. Light appeared in the space, and the feeling of stagnation disappeared because there was time. Life also appeared because there was death. This was life and death. Similarly, this was also a cycle of destruction and creation. The process of the birth of living spaces was different from the super system. The spaces were living spaces were not all planets. There were also interlaced or parallel territories. This series of evolutions passed quickly. In the eyes of a bystander like Chenrui, it was the fast-forward process of the birth of this universe and life. The scene changed again, and he came to a sunny space. Chenrui, who had witnessed the evolution of the universe before, clearly felt that this was the territory formed by the most essential power of the evolution of the universe, or it could be called the main plane. The main plane retained the three most powerful origin powers that created the world. Among these three origins, the strongest was not creation or destruction, but the origin that brewed being and non-being, and life and death, after destruction and before creation. This was the book of life and death, the book of creation, and the book of destruction. Chapter 1272. As a bystander, Chenrui had witnessed the birth of the entire universe and life. The first intelligent life evolved from the book of life and death, and its name was Extremis. Extremis possessed the greatest power. Using the changes of the origin of creation and origin of destruction, he deduced and gave birth to the second generation of intelligent life. He led the second generation of intelligent life to absorb and comprehend the power of the origin. At the same time, more life evolved and were born. All kinds of life appeared in the main plane and some other planes. To be precise, the origin of the universe was the root of the birth of all things. Extremis and the second generation of intelligent life were no exception. They mostly used the power of the origin to accelerate and guide the evolution of life. Even without them, life would still evolve and be born. Extremis was the only life evolved from the book of life and death. He possessed the greatest power. At the same time, he also realized that the book of life and death was the only existence that could restrain him. For this reason, Extremis had thought of destroying the book of life and death more than once. However, the book of life and death was the most origin of power left behind by the evolution of the universe. It could not be destroyed at all. Therefore, he could only try to control or seal it. Just like that, the book of life and death gave birth to a second life, the key. The key was not an ordinary artifact. It was a life form with an independent consciousness. It was compatible with the power of destruction and creation. Its name was Lucifer, which originally meant Supreme Key. Chenrui finally understood Lucifer's identity. No wonder Quiriana called him the incarnation of the Supreme Key. It turned out that Lucifer himself was the Supreme Key. Then, what reappeared in front of him now was the most ancient age of gods since the birth of life in this universe. Lucifer was compatible with the power of the origin of creation and destruction. He could seal the power of the book of life and death. He was a rather powerful life form. He was not inferior to the second generation of intelligent life forms. In order to eliminate a certain potential threat, Extremis used the supreme rule to limit Lucifer's growth when he was born. This caused Lucifer's strength to always stay at a certain level. It would not decrease, nor could it increase. After completing all this, Extremis worshipped the origin that brewed the birth of the entire universe as the founder. He became the supreme god of all life forms in all planes. The second generation of sapient life forms became the gods under the Overgod, respectfully addressing Polaris as Father God. The gods absorbed the power of faith from all kinds of living beings and became stronger. Life was also blessed by the gods and rapidly multiplied and grew stronger. The vitality of the entire universe was unprecedentedly vigorous. The scene cut to another scene. A woman was holding Lucifer's arm intimately as they strolled in the garden. The woman's face couldn't be seen clearly, but her temperament made Chenrui feel that he had seen her before. At this time, an uncoordinated voice came from behind. Lafty, we are now gods. If you continue to walk with him, it will not only damage your dignity, but also the dignity of all the gods. It turned out that this woman was the elemental goddess Lafferty that Chenrui had seen in the elemental realm. This sentence made Lucifer clench his fists, but Lafferty still didn't loosen her grip. She said coldly to the back, "Did you forget the time when you fought alongside him? Have you forgotten the help he gave you? That was then and this is now." The dazzling figure said faintly, "Now is no longer the original chaotic era, but the era of gods that belongs to Father God and us. The rule of this world is that strength is respected. If his strength could be on par with me like before, then we would still be friends. But now, he is just an ant and doesn't deserve to stand beside you and me. It's you, not you and me." Lafferty sneered. "Don't confuse me with you." Hera snorted and looked at Lucifer. "You can only deceive her for a while. After all, she is a god. One day, she will wake up and you will have nothing. If you don't want to fight, get out of here." Lafferty was angry, and her body burned with colorful light. Hera was quite afraid of Lafferty, so he didn't say anything more. He turned into light and disappeared resentfully. Lucifer gently broke away from Lafferty's hand. "You don't have to be like this. Actually, he is right. In the beginning, he and the gods were originally partners. The gods gradually became stronger under the power of faith, while his strength remained below the god level because of the restrictions. Just like that, the gap between their identities and relationships was widened step by step. His friend in the past became a god that he could only look up to. Only Lafferty remained the same. You don't need to take that guy's words to heart. Plus, he is not my opponent at all. Since strength is respected, then I will beat him until he can't speak." Lafferty held Lucifer's hand again. "You don't have confidence in my strength? Or do you not have confidence in my love? Although Light Hera and Darkness Serene are the two leaders of the gods, everyone in the Divine Mountain knows that Element Lafferty is the strongest existence below Father God. No matter what, I have confidence in you." Lucifer looked at this elemental goddess who felt more like a sister than a lover and nodded with a bitter smile. Time passed by quickly. They were still in the garden. Lafferty looked gloomily at the stars in the night sky. "Father God destroyed the Crimson Star Plane today because someone accidentally knocked over the offerings in the temple of the highest god. It's such an insignificant matter, but all the lives in that plane. Why didn't you dissuade him?" The first to dissuade him was the god of livestock Paliusu, but in the end. Lafferty lowered her head. Paliusu was annihilated, and Hera, who was closely related to Paliusu, was also exiled to the lava plain. Lucifer was not happy to hear that the most annoying Hera was exiled. Lafferty sighed and said, "Father has become more and more arbitrary these years. He doesn't tolerate any disobedience or doubt. Even if it's us, we will be executed if we accidentally break the taboo." "Taboo?" Disdain flashed past Lucifer's eyes. "The Crimson Star Plane and Paliusu are just unlucky. The real reason is that our supreme god is still brooding over the god of war's rebellion. War god Kilo had joined forces with a few other gods to steal the Book of Destruction and Book of Creation not long ago, and used the power of these two books to launch an assassination on the supreme god. Unfortunately, the over-god was simply too powerful. He was only slightly injured, and the meticulous assassination attempt had failed." Lafferty frowned. "Wasn't the rebellion quelled? I killed Kilo with my own hands and took back the stolen Book of Creation and Book of Destruction. For this, Father God was very happy and specially rewarded me. His true heart was not happy, but angry and frightened. Today it was Kilo who rebelled, and tomorrow it could be someone else." Lucifer sneered. "He can be unscrupulous and squander his power and divine might as he pleased, but he does not tolerate the slightest bit of disobedience from others. He can even kill people just because he suspects them, but he never suspects himself. If it wasn't for him going against the grain, how could the originally loyal Kilo?" Before he could finish, Lafferty covered his mouth, revealing a look of horror. "Don't say any more. This elemental plane might not be able to hide from Father God's senses if—" Lucifer slowly moved Lafferty's hand away, shaking his head. "Don't worry, I have the Book of Life and Death sealed within me, which is of irreplaceable value to him. At the very least, he won't die. What I'm worried about now is you. This time, you displayed amazing talent in quelling the rebellion. You were actually able to fuse the source of the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction. It seems that you are his most beloved and most outstanding daughter, but right now he doesn't trust anyone. In the face of his desire for absolute control, you are also his most dangerous and potential enemy. Paliusu and the Crimson Star Plane are not the first batch of sacrifices, nor will they be the last. No matter what, you must be careful. I understand. Lafferty nodded. Lucifer sighed. Originally, I wanted to break through the restrictions and become a high and mighty god, worshipped by millions. But now I'm thinking, what is a god? Does this world really need a god? Lafferty also fell silent, and the two were speechless for a long time. The scene changed again, turning into a gloomy prison cell. The walls were covered with the suppression boundary of supreme power, and with Lucifer's strength, there was no way he could break it. Outside the cell window, he could see the sky filled with dark clouds, lightning flashing, and thunder rumbling. The sounds of an intense battle seemed to be coming from outside. The next moment, countless beams of light lit up in the cell, and the Supreme Authority's barrier gradually dissipated under the strong light. A familiar voice rang out. Lucifer! Lucifer was a little surprised, because the one who broke into this secret prison to save him was not Lafferty, but Heinz, who should have been exiled. It was not only Heinz who came, but also Soliat and almost all the other gods. They worked together to open the suppression boundary, but among this group of people, only Lafferty was not present. Father God has completely lost control. Heinz seemed flustered and exasperated. I received reliable information from a servant of the gods that Father God wants to completely devour the power of the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction, and imitate the Founder to destroy and create a brand new world with absolute control. In that world, he will have no weaknesses, and all the original life, including us, will be destroyed. Lucifer was shocked. He did not expect the Supreme God to be this crazy. He hurriedly asked, Where is Lafferty? She is used as a sacrifice to fuse the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction, imprisoned on the altar at the peak of the Divine Mountain, and the ceremony is about to begin. Lucifer's expression changed drastically. He finally understood why the Supreme God imprisoned him. It was not only because of Lafferty, but also because of the Book of Life and Death, which could threaten the Supreme God. He looked at the gods and understood. Do you want to? No one wants to be destroyed in body and soul. If you want to live, and live freely, you have to fight. God of Darkness Soliat said. Lucifer, we need your power. Lucifer's eyebrows twitched. He had not heard these words for a long time. Just like before, Lucifer nodded without hesitation, but this time, it was not for them, but for Lafferty, and for all the life in all the planes. Chapter 1273. After Lucifer and the gods left the prison, the scene in Chinray's eyes changed again, this time to the scene of a fierce battle. The void was shattered, and the whole world was constantly twisting, shattering, and shaking. Terrifying energy waves dissipated in all directions. Although these were only existences similar to soul illusions to Chinray, he could still feel the terror of that level of energy. Even if he was at his peak, once he was caught in that energy wave, he would be turned into ashes. Not long ago, Chinray had witnessed a large-scale battle in the UFO land. The number of people fighting in front of him was far less than that battle, but the power and intensity were more than 1,000 times greater. This was the battle of the gods. To be more precise, it was the first battle of the gods. The gods turned into galaxies that contained great power, surrounding the Supreme God in the center. Every attack carried a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. Even the Supreme God would not be able to escape unscathed under such attacks. The injured Supreme God let out a furious roar, and wherever his will reached, the galaxies were shattered and shattered. The immortal bodies of the gods were torn into pieces by the terrifying power and turned into dust. Many gods fell one after another. For the sake of survival, the gods had no other choice. They suppressed the fear in their hearts and continued to besiege the Supreme God. However, the power of the Supreme God was too strong. The surging power was like a small universe, and the radiance of all the galaxies and stars seemed insignificant and dim in front of him. To the gods, the situation was extremely dangerous. At this moment, the Supreme God suddenly showed a look of fear, because the power that he feared the most had appeared, the Book of Life and Death. These damned guys, they actually released the supreme key that he had secretly suppressed in the prison, and they even opened the suppression power that he had placed on Lucifer. Now, the most dreadful thing, the Book of Life and Death, had been released. As soon as the ore of life and death appeared, the power of the supreme gods was greatly suppressed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the remaining gods, under the leadership of Hanks and Soliat, launched the craziest attack without any regard for their own lives. Finally, the Supreme God could not hold on any longer. His damaged body emitted a blood-red aura, and his body began to be destroyed bit by bit. Realizing that he was in a hopeless situation, the Supreme Divine General made up his mind and charged toward the Book of Life and Death at the risk of being completely annihilated. He didn't hesitate to destroy his own body as he forcefully fused with the Book of Life and Death, erupting with a power that made everyone tremble. The paramount God had made up his mind. Even if he died, he wanted everyone to die with him. This wasn't just the power of the Book of Life and Death. Lucifer had used the power of the Legion of Gods to break free of the paramount God's seal, but that had already hurt his vital energy. Even if he used all of his power, he wouldn't be able to seal the Book of Life and Death. Just when Lucifer was exhausted and on the verge of annihilation, something happened that he could never forget. Lafferty stood in front of him and used her talent to activate the Book of Creation and Book of Destruction. She fused with the sealing power within Lucifer's body and sealed the Book of Life and Death and the remnant soul of the Supreme God in her own elemental plane. The price was her life. At the last moment of being sealed, the Supreme God cursed Lucifer with her soul and the Book of Life and Death. She cursed Lucifer to live a life worse than death and suffered in agony. She cursed the gods to lose their divinity, and their souls to sink in darkness forever. At the moment, Lucifer escaped the fate of being the key, but lost his loved one. This kind of pain didn't need to be cursed. The scene in Chunrei's eyes gradually became blurry. He finally understood the whole story of the first battle of the gods, and what kind of existence was sealed in the elemental plane. The elemental war must be a ritual to maintain the seal when the elemental goddess wasn't around. Only if Lafferty's shard of divinity could it end the elemental war. This was the first battle of the gods and the succession of divine authority. In the end, the Supreme God was defeated by the gods and sealed in the elemental plane. The scene changed again and showed the gods fighting against the will of the abyss formed by the divinity of darkness. After a few gods unexpectedly fell, the gods finally discovered the secret that the divinity of darkness was equivalent to their destiny twins. Annihilating the divinity of darkness was equivalent to suicide, so the gods gave up their original intention and sealed the will of the abyss in the lava plane. As a precaution, they also set up a barrier of authority in the main plane. The gods who thought that they had completely solved the problem started to replace the Supreme God to control the world and enjoy a free and unrestrained life. They accepted the worship of all life and bestowed all kinds of power to their believers. They selected a large number of divine servants to spread their own beliefs and doctrines. The devout believers built the city of angels at the foot of the sacred mountain. Through the divine servants, they listened to the teachings of the gods. The gods would also send down miracles from time to time. From Chunrei's point of view, this city of angels was very similar to the city of holy light of the Church of Light that he knew. It was probably planned by Michael and the others based on the original city of angels. Other than the gods, the highest administrator of the city of angels was the leader of the 7 angels. Among the 7 archangels, Lucifer was ranked first. Although he was restricted by the supreme authority and couldn't break through to the divine level, Lucifer was undoubtedly the number 1 person below the divine level in terms of strength, combat experience, and qualifications. Having experienced the death of the elemental goddess, Lucifer gradually recovered from the trauma in his heart with the comfort of time. He now had a warm home. His main wife was the former divine servant of the elemental goddess, Phoenix Maiden. He also had many concubines. As the most powerful archangel, he also had the most admirers, including outstanding women like Gabriel and Ben Hong. The divine servant who revealed the conspiracy of the supreme god to destroy the world back then was the elf Lucifer, who had a certain level of foresight. She was appointed as the servant of fate by the gods and became friends with Lucifer. Michael, Satan, and the others also admired Lucifer's power and followed him in everything. He had a family, relatives, and friends. This allowed Lucifer to find the meaning of life again. However, good times didn't last long. While the gods enjoyed freedom and the highest authority, their desires also expanded rapidly. Due to losing that common enemy, the original conflicts started to become more prominent. The conflict of beliefs intensified day by day, and finally, they split into two camps, the light and the darkness. Since he had a feud with the god of light, Hanks, Lucifer did not hesitate to accept the invitation of the god of darkness, Satan. He chose the dark camp led by the god of darkness, Soliat, and retreated to the demon realm. Michael was originally one of the three most powerful god of light messengers. It was impossible for him to betray Hanks. Gabriel and Raphael were the same. His former companions became enemies. The messengers of the dark camp were denounced as fallen by the angels on the surface. Only Ben Hong silently followed Lucifer into the darkness. The light denounced the darkness as evil, and the darkness retorted that the light was hypocritical. Under the conflict of beliefs and beliefs, the war between the two sides was inevitable. This was a long war, and also a catastrophe. The believers fought crazily for the will of the gods. Countless messengers, divine servants, and believers died in the war. Chenrei had already witnessed the tragic situation in the UFO land, and he still had lingering fears. The overlapping hatred and the fanaticism of the faith caused the war to escalate further. The war affected more and more innocent people. As the strongest warrior, Lucifer had once indulged in the pleasure of killing enemies and controlling the battlefield. Until one day, when he returned home, he found that the warm home had turned into a scorched earth. His loved ones, whose voices and smiles were still in his memory, had turned into cold corpses. Just like Lafty back then, he paid the price with his life. The supreme key that his body had transformed into was torn apart and scattered into the 7 artifacts. Only by borrowing the power of the source of the Book of Life and Death, a trace of his remnant soul was preserved and scattered among the 7 artifacts. What happened afterward, Chenrei had personally experienced it. It was him who analyzed the 7 artifacts, allowing Lucifer's soul to reunite and obtain an early and weakest rebirth. The 7 scattered artifacts on the scene fused together and revealed Lucifer's shadow, quietly looking at Chenrei. Lucifer's eyes were still as peculiar as when they first met. They seemed indifferent, but contained deep emotions that were unforgettable. If there was a third person, they would find that although the two looked completely different, some of their temperaments were similar. This might be the reason why many people misunderstood that Chenrei was Lucifer. Chenrei was also looking at Lucifer. These images in his consciousness just now were transmitted to him by Lucifer using the last of his soul power. It was not only to tell him the truth, but also something else. Lucifer's current remnant soul could only summon the Book of Life and Death once before the Supreme Key completely collapsed. It could only be summoned and could not be sealed again. Chenrei suddenly remembered the bet between Lucifer and Lucifer in the mirror world. In an instant, he seemed to understand something. The past could no longer be replicated, and it was meaningless. If he wanted to truly end or change everything, he could only transcend. Lucifer could not transcend the past, so Lucifer chose the more likely Chenrei. Transcend? Not only to surpass Lucifer, but also not to surpass other existences. More importantly, it was to surpass oneself. As the supreme god of the super-system universe, in another sense. Until now, Chenrei was still not sure if Lucifer really knew the identity of a transmigrator, or if she knew about the integration of the super system. He could only be sure that the elf prophet, this bet was indeed very big. Seeing that Chenrei seemed to have understood something, Lucifer smiled, and his face gradually became thinner. Chenrei's vision returned to the original Chaos realm. Although his consciousness had experienced many things just now, in reality, it was only a split second. In the Chaos realm, countless indescribable powerful forces filled all of Chenrei's senses. He saw those huge corpses open their eyes one after another, and with vast and boundless power, they pounced towards him. In the sky, there were two rays of intense origin light, creation and destruction. Under such terrifying power, Chenrei could not escape, could not move, and could not even think. However, his eyes were calm, and the light of the card in his hand was getting brighter and brighter. The blood-red light illuminated the entire Chaos realm. Under the illumination of this light, the brilliance of the Book of Creation and the Book of Destruction seemed to be overshadowed. The terrifying power emitted by the huge corpses was torn apart one after another. Even the sturdiest space of the Chaos realm showed signs of solidification, and burning blood flames sprayed out of the cracks in the space. As the holder of the Supreme Key, Chenrei did not feel the damage of the blood flames. However, the awakened giants let out shrill screams, and their bodies quickly scorched under the burning of the red flames. The stars in the galaxy burst and disintegrated one after another. The scattered stars seemed to be attracted by something, and all of them frantically rushed towards the card and were instantly swallowed. At their peak, even the gods were not the opponents of the Supreme God, let alone in this state. The screams soon weakened, and the bodies of the giants began to rapidly decompose, and finally all turned into nothingness. These former gods did not hesitate to transform into the will of the abyss, and tried their best to destroy the entire world to resurrect, but in the end, it was all for naught. This was the twilight of the gods, again, and it was also the true end. Just as the reflection of the demon realm and the surface world was about to reach the surface, it suddenly stopped moving, and the originally clear image gradually faded. After the gods disappeared, the entire Chaos realm suddenly became empty. However, Chenrei did not leave, because he knew that there was still the final and most terrifying enemy. Chapter 1274. The magic card in Chenrei's hand slowly scattered into glowing particles. In the opposite space, a blurry shadow that was faintly blood-red appeared. In the blood-red shadow, the first thing that became clear was an eye. It was a blood-red pupil. This eye emitted the most primitive and ultimate aura, eternal and immortal. If it was Chenrei who left the Gate of Two Realms for the Nightmare Volcano, he would have been annihilated by this gaze. Even if he had just stepped into the chaotic realm, his soul and will would have disintegrated under this gaze. However, Chenrei was not scared out of his wits. He just stared at that eye. The silhouette next to his eyes gradually became clearer, turning into a human body. Although it was clearly right in front of him, it gave off a feeling that it was unreachable. On the surface, there was no majestic and astonishing power, but those astonishing giants from before had all been reduced to ashes by the power of this person's hands and feet. This person's appearance was looming. It seemed to be perfect and flawless. The most clear thing was the eyes. The left eye had a blood-red pupil, and the right eye was empty black. Chenrei suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and he suddenly understood. Abyss. It turned out that the will that manipulated everything behind the scenes, the true will of the abyss, was not the gods, but the Supreme God. Why would the gods be reborn in the divinity of darkness after they fell? From that moment on, the gods had fallen into the chessboard of the Supreme God. In that case, even if the gods really destroyed the world and completely recovered, the will of the abyss would use some kind of power in the curse to break free from the seal and resurrect, becoming the final winner. In the calculations of the Supreme God, those high and mighty gods were just chess pieces that could be controlled. The surrounding space had become another place. This place was not unfamiliar to Chenrei. The elemental plane, where the existence of the Supreme God was sealed. Now, in this plane, the aura of the elements could no longer be felt. It was filled with another kind of great and vast power that was thousands of times stronger. The vitality of the elemental plane, including the great elemental unveil that should be immortal, had disappeared without a trace. The rules of the universe had life and death. There was no existence that was truly immortal, unless it transcended the rules of the entire universe. Shinrei didn't find out what happened in the elements realm. Instead, he just watched this person in front of him. There were 3 balls of light in this person's hands, and they emitted the most fundamental aura: creation, destruction, and life and death. According to legend, the Creator used 3 days to destroy the original universe and 3 days to create this universe. There was still a day between the destruction and creation, so there was a total of 7 days. In his previous consciousness, Shinrei witnessed the birth of this universe with his own eyes. Combined with the process of the supersystem, he had a further understanding. The first 3 days were the incubation of being in nothingness. The 4th day was the most mysterious, creating something out of nothing. The 3rd day was the birth of being. Just as the Tao Te Ching said, "Nameless is the beginning of all living things, and famous is the mother of all living things." Both came from the same source, with different names having the same meaning. It was the most mysterious of mysteries, the door of all wonders. The Over-God, under the summons of the paramount key, had already broken free from his seal. In addition, he was now in control of the most powerful prime essences, which represented the 3 profound mysteries of being, nothing, and being nothing. "Who are you?" There was a hint of doubt in the voice that was as deep as the sky. It seemed to be surprised that this ant had not been annihilated. Although he had the dominant will of Quiriana and was no stranger to Shinrei, in the eyes of the Over-God, this kind of ant was not worth remembering at all. Shinrei did not make a sound. He just quietly felt and understood the power of this sentence that vibrated in his soul. "Answer!" The surrounding space trembled. Countless tearing forces appeared on Shinrei's body, but they were blocked by some kind of power. It turned out that the light spots that were scattered by the magic card did not disappear. Instead, they covered his body and protected him. Under the attack of this power, the light spots revealed their final form: sword, ring, mask, shield, armor, cloak, and boots. The whole set of the 7 artifacts that had disappeared once again covered Shinrei's body. As one, they emitted a pure power that they did not have before. They contained some kind of ultimate truth between life and death. These were the real 7 artifacts, and also the last gift that Lucifer had left for him. The 7 artifacts once contained the power of Lucifer's soul, which was part of the Book of Life and Death. After the second twilight of the gods, Lucifer's soul was split into 7 parts along with the paramount key and fell into the demon realm. Under the influence of the power of the Book of Life and Death, the demon realm gave birth to the 7 royal clans. This was also the reason why the 7 artifacts could only be used by the 7 royal clans. Of course, Shinrei was an exception. Now, these 7 pieces of equipment were no longer the paramount key, but the 7 divine artifacts. Just trash that has lost its soul. There was a hint of disdain in the voice of the Supreme God on the other side, and there was also a hint of anger in the disdain. It was not toward the ant, Shinrei, but toward the supreme key of the past. As soon as the Over-God finished speaking, a large number of cracks suddenly appeared on the 7 artifacts. Even the so-called strongest illusory demon shield was the same. Even though they themselves contained some kind of mystery from the Book of Life and Death, in the face of the Over-God's absolute power, they were still vulnerable. The power of a single sentence was enough to make them all crack. The terrifying power penetrated the 7 artifacts and wrapped around Shinrei. His body suddenly became blurry, and the 7 artifacts were also rapidly disintegrating. The Over-God didn't look at the ant that was easily destroyed. He said to himself, "After so many years, I finally understood the mystery of the Book of Life and Death. Even if I didn't open the Book of Life and Death, even if those stupid chess pieces failed, it was only a matter of time before I unlocked the seal. Now creation, destruction, life and death are all under my control. No one can stop me from destroying and creating the entire world." Shinrei's voice sounded. "The gods have already fallen. The Book of Life and Death, The book of creation and the book of destruction are all in your hands. Why do you still want to destroy the world? You're not destroyed? The Overgod was slightly surprised. He saw that Chenrei's body, which had been as thin as smoke, was gradually becoming clearer. The Overgod could clearly feel that the eyes of this ant seemed to be shining with dazzling starlight. Even he couldn't ignore that kind of brilliance. The 7 artifacts were already gone. He didn't know if they had completely disintegrated or been put away. At least, for the current Chenrei, he didn't need them anymore. A newly ascended god? The Supreme God finally looked at him in the eye. At this time, in Chenrei's consciousness, there was some kind of earth-shattering change. This change had already begun when he was fighting with Quiriana. The fusion of the constellations, the blazing life, the battle that burned everything. Not only was it an attack on the will of the abyss, it was also a touch of transcendence. After devouring that part of the godly power, although his body was heavily injured, the originally hazy feeling became more and more clear. More clarity came from the experience in Lucifer's soul after entering the chaotic realm. In the process of watching the evolution of the universe, his entire consciousness and perception unknowingly broke through a critical point. It was when the Overgod used the supreme power to destroy him just now. It was equivalent to completely opening a door in front of him. There was no strong breakthrough in the battle, no outbreak of a cockroach before death, and no burning everything in the battle with Quiriana. It was just nature. It was completely different from the feeling when the abyss invasion was in vain. At the last moment of facing annihilation, and the calmness of completely letting go of everything, he naturally touched something that he had never been able to touch. In the status light screen of the Galaxy Divinity Temple of the Supersystem, a light ball that slowly lit up appeared on the head of the three-dimensional human body. Together with the 6 below, it formed a straight line and ran vertically through the center of the human body. The 7th light ball was also the last one. The word in the light ball was E. So far, all the light balls were lit up. Astral, evil, fierce, law, transform, develop, E. There were a total of 7 realms. The strange thing was that in the last 7-star realm of evolution, no new skills or abilities were added. Instead, all the original abilities or data gradually faded and were replaced by another brand new feeling, E. Chenrei was in a half-understanding state when he heard the Overgod said in a deep voice. I didn't expect that after me and those minions, a new god could be born in this main plane where the belief has been declining rapidly. You are completely different from those minions just now. You give me a different feeling as if you are not under my control. It is because of the existence of a threat like you that I must destroy this world and recreate a more perfect world. And in this process, I will also touch the perception of the Creator and truly become a flawless, supreme God with absolute control, dominating the entire universe. Chenrei shook his head. Just for the so-called absolute control, the will of the abyss you control induced those stupid gods to destroy almost all the planes. Now you want to kill the last remaining creatures of this main plane? You are actually puzzled by this kind of thing? I really don't know how you have the power you have now. There was a hint of astonishment in the Overgod's voice. In my memory, hatred should have said something to you. Weakness is the most unforgivable original sin. Weakness doesn't mean that they have lost the meaning of their existence, and it doesn't mean that you can arbitrarily deprive them of the meaning of their existence. Chenrei shook his head. In my understanding, the ants in your eyes are the foundation of this world. The millions of lives are the roof of the entire world. Fools! The Overgod shook his head disdainfully. You don't have the awareness that a god should have, and you don't dare to look directly into your heart. Now I will grant you this awareness. With that, the Overgod's left eye flashed, and an identical person gradually separated from Chenrei's body. Look directly into the darkness in your heart. The Overgod's laughter was full of malice. Originally, he was a little afraid of this newly ascended god, but now it seemed that this guy's weakness was too obvious. As long as he reflected the darkness divinity in this person's heart, he would not even need to do anything, and he could win without fighting. This is the supreme power of the curse? Back then, the gods succumbed to the darkness divinity because of their desire to live, and thus fell into your control. I can guess that most of the power produced by their destruction was absorbed by this divinity and transmitted to you, who was sealed in the elemental realm. No wonder your strength could recover to this extent. Those pitiful fellows are still delusional about seizing my supreme key after they recover and continue to seal you. As long as they completely recover, you will directly break the seal and descend. The Overgod said proudly. My will is not something that can be shaken by those stupid minions. Since they dared to go against their superiors in the past, they must be prepared to pay the corresponding price. However, you should be more worried about yourself now. Shinrei's eyes shone with a penetrating light. Looking at the person in front of him who looked exactly the same as him, he suddenly laughed. I've fought him more than once. He has a name, Shura. It turned out that this darkness divinity was actually Shura, who had originally disappeared. He once disappeared from my heart, but I know that he has always existed, just like myself. Shinrei slowly walked towards Shura. In the course of life, I have always been looking straight at him, and straight at myself. Shura looked at Shinrei approaching, but did not make a move. Instead, like a mirror, he revealed the same smile. Their figures merged into one, as if nothing had happened. The Overgod was finally moved. The self, that even the gods surrendered to, was actually so easily conquered by this person. Perhaps it was not conquered. From the beginning, for him, darkness had no threat. Just like what he said himself, I have always been looking straight at him. In fact, it was not that nothing had happened. The moment Shinrei walked into Shura, the strange feeling in the super system became more and more intense. In the midst of changes, all the data, abilities, and even the Galaxy Divinity Temple had completely disappeared. Only the vast universe was still as bright as before. Those things that had disappeared might have never really existed in this universe, but in Shinrei's heart, they were the most real existence. The power that he had vaguely touched before had slowly been grasped in his hands. The super system was the real universe. The data displayed before was just one of the changes in the universe. Darkness, light, destruction, creation, life, death, it was the same. All changes returned to the origin. In the end, it would return to the beginning. No light, no form, no shape, no name. This was he. In the midst of understanding, the bright starlight in Shinrei's pupils disappeared, but his temperament seemed more and more vast. The Overgod finally began to look at Shinrei seriously. This person's persistence and breath were very strange. He was definitely not comparable to ordinary gods. A certain sense of danger was also becoming clearer and clearer. For the first time in his life, he had such a feeling when facing an enemy. In that case, what are you still hesitating for? The Overgod asked with a sneer. The power of this plane was integrated into this sentence, turning into a sharp force that pressed straight towards Shinrei. The Overgod took the initiative to attack. At their level, the confrontation between words was no longer a simple psychological tactic, nor was it as simple as saying the law. Instead, it was a great rule power that directly faced the mind. Once there was a flaw in the mind, it would be completely suppressed, and the subsequent attack would be at an absolute disadvantage. Therefore, this was not only a contest of strength, but also a contest of the mind. The heart was inescapable. Chapter 1275. I'm just thinking, Shinrei replied, and the power of the plane suddenly distorted. The pressure in the Supreme God's words was like flowing water meeting a rock in the middle of a pillar, and it immediately split. Does this world need gods? Are you denying the meaning of your existence? The Supreme God sneered, and the plane became cold. If it was an ordinary fake god, their soul would freeze and die instantly if they stayed here for a second. I'm not a god. Shinrei smiled indifferently, but his tone was unprecedentedly firm. After saying this, his aura became even more unfathomable. It was as if he was the vast universe, and no matter how the power of the plane changed, it could be contained in it. These simple words revealed the strength and persistence of the soul, which made the supreme god secretly tremble. He suddenly thought of something and showed a shocked expression. The founder! The founder? Shinrei was surprised. It couldn't be. Before he crossed over, he was a real loser. If he was really the founder and the lord of the earth, the supreme god immediately denied his guess. No! If it was the real power of the founder, just one look at me, and my will would be completely annihilated. Shinrei frowned. The power of the founder is so strong? Of course, that's the supreme existence that created the universe. Even though I've never seen him, as the first life form that was born from the book of life and death, I know very well of his existence. His realm is also my lifelong goal. The supreme god's left eye shone brightly, as if he wanted to see through everything about Shinrei. His voice became deeper and deeper. Although your power is not even a billionth of his, the aura is indeed very similar. Perhaps you have obtained a power seed or some other secret treasure left by the founder to reach the level you are today. That must be it. Otherwise, with your actual age, how could you grow to the same level as me? The supreme god's words made Shinrei immediately come to a realization. He thought of the situation before he crossed over. Right, that damn mobile phone. And the super system. At Shinrei's current realm, it was clear that it was just like the skills and data of the realms before the super system. Whether it was the mobile phone or the super system, it was just a form of the universe's change. No matter what form it took, the final outcome was the same. The originator, let's call it that for now, should be the most original existence. It might have left its traces in many universes and planes, and he was just one of the lucky ones. Moreover, he was lucky enough to walk all the way to the end. Perhaps it was not the end, but a new beginning. Evolving the universe and comprehending the mysteries of life were only the first step. After mastering the state of Shinrei seemed to have seen a new starting point. This starting point had more unknowns and unknowns. The answer lies in the vast universe. However, these were all matters of the future. If he wanted to enter the future, he had to protect the present. Right now, the most important thing was to defeat the Overgod, save his family, friends, and all the lives in the plane that were about to be destroyed. Ha! I didn't expect to meet an existence like you. This is my best chance. The Overgod suddenly laughed, his voice filled with ecstasy. As long as I devour your soul and power, and obtain your enlightenment, my realm will have a qualitative leap. It will also be easier for me to reach the highest level. Shinrei also laughed, and his smile was filled with determination. I still haven't figured out whether this world needs a god or not, but I can be sure of one thing. This world doesn't need you. It's obvious that you've just comprehended this power. I won't give you time to comprehend it. I'll use all my strength to unleash my strongest attack, a sure-kill blow. The Book of Life and Death, Book of Destruction, and Book of Creation in the Overgod's hands simultaneously emitted a strong light, and slowly merged into his body. The blood-red eyes flashed, and he suddenly added, You want to protect the living beings in the demon realm, right? This elemental plane definitely can't withstand the shockwaves caused by our battle. The entire main plane will be affected. The things you want to protect will be destroyed by you with your own hands. The Overgod didn't have the concept of sinister. In his eyes, the winner was king, and the strong were respected. In battle, there was no limit to what one could do. Moreover, as the supreme ruler, he wasn't bound by any rules. Shinrei wasn't moved, and his answer became even more resolute. That is, the power that completely overwhelms you. Both of their wills were extremely strong, and words could no longer break each other's hearts. Therefore, both of them attacked at the same time. Endless light appeared around Shinrei and the Overgod at the same time. The bright power and the blood-red power were locked in a stalemate, like two vast universes. The next moment, the universes intertwined and collided. Looking at the gloomy sky of the demon realm, for some reason, everyone's sense of danger didn't really disappear because of the weakening of the reflection. Instead, it became even stronger. The silence before the storm finally ended, and the entire world shook violently. Everyone's consciousness and soul began to tremble, as if they had fallen into some strange darkness that could dissipate at any moment. The trembling lasted for a long time. As for how long, no one could be sure. Because even time had changed under this indescribable power. It seemed like a moment, but it also seemed like tens of thousands of years. No one knew what was going to happen. No one knew if they could survive. All the fear, despair, helplessness, and other emotions were transferred into the blood-red universe through a special channel. The blood-red power in the universe grew stronger and stronger. It pressed down on the bright universe, and gradually gained the upper hand. In the bright universe, Chinray slowly spread his hands. The bright power flourished, and firmly resisted the power of the blood-red universe. In the dark vision of the people of the demon realm, light appeared. That gentle light seemed to be hope. Everyone's eyes looked at hope. At least in the darkness, they didn't look around blankly. In the battlefield in the alternate dimension, Chinray also felt that kind of emotion, or perhaps it was called emotion. There was light and darkness in people's hearts at the same time. They would be afraid because of certain things, and they would also be fearless because of certain things. Because they were people. Not gods. The so-called gods in front of him were just people who had reached a higher level of power. Therefore, he was just a person. It was like looking directly at the dark self that had always existed. In that instant, Chinray finally understood some kind of truth, and found his own path. He wasn't like the person in front of him. Although he had near invincible power, he couldn't see himself clearly. No matter how hard he tried, he could only pace back and forth in the same place. Chinray's heart had completely calmed down. The power of the universe also calmed down and retracted. In this situation, the blood-red universe surged forward without hesitation, instantly swallowing the dazzling power of the universe. In the instant that the dazzling power of the universe swallowed him up, Chinray's eyes still seemed calm, like the primordial chaos that gave birth to countless lives. There was no light, no form, no shape, no name. The mortal plane. Perhaps because of his faith and prayers, the shaking of heaven and earth gradually calmed down. In the other dimension, the most violent shaking also calmed down. Chinray's body was surrounded by endless blood-red stars. In front of him, the paramount god stared at him, his eyes filled with disbelief. A moment later, the paramount god said, "Why do you have this kind of power?" Chinray thought for a moment, then answered, "Because I have more than just power." As soon as he finished speaking, a crack sounded, and the blood-red pupil of the paramount god's left eye cracked. At the same time, all the blood-red stars cracked. Next, the body of the paramount god, along with the entire blood-red universe, completely shattered, revealing the even more dazzling universe behind it. The constellations that were full of life were especially dazzling. Under the illumination of these stars, the shattered blood-red color broke down into countless particles, until it completely disappeared. The people of the demon realm didn't know what was happening in the other dimension. They only saw the two moons that they hadn't seen in a long time appear in the sky again, emitting a gentle light, just like before. The haze in their hearts finally dissipated, and heartfelt cheers rang out in every corner. In another place, Blanche's eyes slowly opened, and she looked at the two people in front of her in surprise. One was an extremely beautiful woman, her blue eyes as deep as the ocean, holding the hand of a delicate and adorable little girl. The two of them gave Blanche a sense of security and tranquility. "My name is Veronica, and this is Avril. Welcome home, Blanche." Veronica stretched out her hand. "Home." Blanche felt a little dazed. Looking at Veronica's smile, she felt the warmth and friendliness that came from the bottom of her heart. She couldn't help but hold her hand, and suddenly found that her hand and body had returned to normal. "How do you know me? What is this place?" "This is the Astral Divinity Temple, or rather, it used to be called this. In any case, it was created by that guy." At the mention of that guy, Veronica's smile became even more gentle. "From now on, this is your home, and also our home." "Him?" Blanche already understood, and then revealed a puzzled expression. Didn't I already disappear? Even if it's a soul. Veronica looked at Avril. In this world full of hope, anything is possible. Let's go sit over there, and you can listen to Avril's story. You should be able to get the answer. Compared to Avril's weakest consciousness, the remaining consciousness on the glasses and the crystal ball was much stronger. Somewhere further away, or to be more precise, a whole new world in some universe. Another pair of eyes opened, and the look was very strange. It seemed indifferent to everything, but it contained deep emotions. He looked around in surprise, and the most surprising thing was that he still existed. Yes, he existed. This was the meaning of life that he understood. Through some kind of test, he passed on to another more hopeful person. Now it seemed that that person did not let him and Alicia down. Is that you? A very familiar voice rang out behind him. It was an unforgettable voice. She was his lover, sister, and companion. In order to prevent her from being cursed and falling into the blasphemy of darkness, he did not hesitate to destroy the last remnant of her soul. From that moment on, his real soul had been destroyed along with her, and the only thing left was the determination to completely destroy the will. It's me. He didn't wipe the tears from the corner of his eyes. He carefully and slowly turned around and saw her smiling at a glance. It was just like the first time they met. In the distance, some figures were waving at him. They were all there. It turned out that whether it was the past, present, or tomorrow, they had never left. He looked at the strange clothes on his body and suddenly smiled. Another world. As he spoke, he held her hand and strode towards the men. Dark Moon Residence. Duo, who was next to Fayre, suddenly sensed something and showed a look of surprise. She jumped up and turned into a flame, flying toward the gate of the courtyard. Dad! Mom! Hearing this voice, Duo in Fayre's arms also reacted. This time, the sharp-eyed brat accurately found the two figures that appeared at the door, and happily stretched out her little hand to point there. After the sky completely returned to normal, Augustus and others had already realized a possible outcome. They all stood up and went to the door. The door was very lively. All the people who left with Shenrui were all there. However, powerhouses like Augustus, Palgoris, Melia, and Span were keenly aware of some changes in these people. They couldn't tell what it was specifically, but they had an incredible feeling. The most incredible thing was that Shenrui, who was tightly hugged by Duo, was clearly in front of them, but he seemed as far away as the stars. That kind of temperament couldn't be described in any words. Humph! No matter what he is my son-in-law anyway. Augustus comforted himself. He glanced at Palgoris on the side like a demonstration, and he smiled with his two daughters who returned safely. However, when the space ring containing most of his belongings was moved, and conveniently taken away by a daughter, and the other daughter didn't bother to be moved at all. Instead, she stretched out her hand to touch Joanna's buttocks. His Majesty Dragon Emperor's smile froze on his face. Humph! I have daughters too. The other Dragon Emperor was obviously not confident when he said this, and he didn't see Ariel. However, since the human was fine, Ariel was naturally fine. It was very likely that she had obtained some kind of unimaginable benefit like those guys. Melia still couldn't help but ask, Shenrui, have you reached that level? As soon as this sentence came out, Palgoris, Augustus, and the others all pricked up their ears. What level have you reached, brother? Fayre asked curiously. God? Rex vaguely guessed, and he felt inexplicably excited. His son had actually become a god. Fayre, on the other hand, was frightened. She covered her mouth in surprise. I am not a god. Shenrui smiled at Fayre and touched her head. This sentence was not only an explanation, but also a new starting point for him. I know, brother is brother, Alice answered first. Brother is Shenrui, Shenrui as in Shin, Shenrui as in Shenrui. As she said this, the little princess used her official position for personal gain and kissed Shenrui hard in front of everyone, indicating that brother was no different from before. he was still kissed by the princess. This action was met with Dwudwa's counterattack. For a moment, Chenrei's face was covered with the little girl's saliva stains as she declared her independence. Chenrei laughed, and used his beard stubble to poke his daughter's face. The little girl discontentedly crawled into Catherine's arms and acted like a spoiled child. In this world, there is another world. Do we really need gods? After smiling and kissing her daughter, Catherine, who had personally experienced that battle and was also the goddess of wisdom from another universe, asked the most profound question. This is a question that requires a long time to think about. I still don't know the answer now. The only thing I can be sure of is that. Chenrei shook his head and glanced at everyone present. I need everyone. A knowing smile appeared on everyone's faces. Alice happily jumped onto Chenrei's back. Miss Duoduo was unwilling to be outdone and occupied Papa's neck. Kia mischievously wanted to hang another koala on him, but the naughty child didn't give her any face and cried loudly as usual. Outside the frolicking crowd, Ben Hong stood quietly in the corner and watched the scene. His calm eyes seemed to be without joy or sorrow, but there was no longer the loneliness from before. There was only one sentence in his heart. Whether I look at you or not, your heart is always in my heart, and I won't give it up. End of book.